Just as a reminder, I'm about to click start webinar, which brings in the public. And just for audio clarity, if you would think about the fact that we've got participants that are 300 miles away, I would appreciate a little more volume on voices. That's a nice way to say
yell
that.
500 miles.
So starting, as soon as I see an attendee or two pop in, I'll give it a cue. Ed, we're in public. Good to go.
Thank you. Good morning. This is Ed Hamrick, Assistant Attorney General, and I represent the State Board of Land Commissioners. This morning, the board has been in executive session to discuss the matters that were noticed for executive session on the board's agenda. And in addition, an additional litigation update on the Phillips appeal matter, which the Court of Appeals issued its opinion this morning on. The matters were limited to attorney-client communication or communications otherwise authorized by statute under 246402 3A 1, 2, and 3 of the Colorado Revised Statutes. No decisions were made in executive session. The board is now back on the record. It's March 10th and is ready to proceed with the body of its agenda.
Thank you, Ed. As noted, we are out of executive session and beginning our public meeting. And the first order of business is any public comment that is not related to one of our agenda items. If there's anyone either here in person or on Zoom.
We are actually starting with public comment first,
Okay.
and I think that's why you're here. So.
Yeah, should I just
Please,
have a seat
please.
stand right here?
Sorry to catch you off guard.
No,
We're,
that's okay.
I should note on our record today that we've got a hard stop time around 1 o'clock today, and so we're trying to manage a meeting so that we can get 3 of our new commissioners over for their confirmation hearings in front of the Senate Agriculture Committee. So Chairwoman Scanlon and I will be working hard to try and keep this on time today.
Members of the public, when it comes time for the opportunity for public to make comments, including the one we're in right now for items that are not on the agenda, on the Zoom meeting, you have a feature that allows you to raise a hand, and that creates a queue of people who want to make comment. So I'll rely on that feature to know that you want to make comment. But we also, just letting folks know on Zoom, that we also have an open meeting here in Denver. And so if we don't get to your raised hand really quickly, it may be because we're welcoming members of the visiting public to speak as well. So, and that being said, guests, please know that we have a live Zoom going that you have to use a little, I'm using my big boy voice a little bit. You have to use a little bit extra power to make sure that folks can hear you on the Zoom. And that's about it for logistics. Thanks.
Welcome. Great. I will try to project. My name is Hillary Cooper. I'm a San Miguel County Commissioner. Just had a wonderful conversation with Grant in the hall, talking about a really cool project that's going to happen on the Miramonte parcel in San Miguel County, wet meadow restoration project for Gunnison sage grouse. And just got very excited talking about that. That's not actually why I came today, but thank you for your support of that project. It's bird is in this bird, and we all need to do more to preserve it. So it's a really important project. I'm here to talk to you about the Wilson Mesa parcel, also in San Miguel County. We submitted a letter in December. I've got a copy of that letter. I added some beautiful images of what we consider really a flagship parcel of your stewardship program. Understand there's a lot going on with that parcel right now, and we are very interested. We continue to be very interested in asking you to keep the parcel in your stewardship program. And if that's not possible, then explore a government-to-government purchase so that we can continue working with some conservation buyers to preserve the natural values of the land, also to preserve the access, and also to have that parcel really continue to work within that region additional development impacts on that parcel if it were sold off to the free market would be very impactful to us. It would be impactful to the region. It would be impactful to the neighborhood up there and the character of that area. And so we think that we've been talking to a group of buyers that's very interested in preserving the parcel, preserving the natural values, also exploring with the Ute tribe, local camp program to bring kids out, use it for educational purposes, also exploring the existing access to the neighboring leasee that works with that land right now. So I have this letter. I won't take up any more of your time. Just wanted to come here in person as I'm here for legislative stuff and express that to you in person. And thank you for all your work. Also, thank you for the working with us on the Miramonte parcel. We're really excited about that.
Commissioner. I'm going to first ask Nick if there's anyone else in the room who's here for comment on something that's not on our agenda, and then we'll turn to Zoom.
Anybody's jumping up?
No one seems to be jumping up.
So we do have one hand raised on the Zoom from Barbara Moss Murphy. And Ms. Murphy, I'm going to promote you to a panelist, which allows you to be seen and address the board. There we go, in there.
Welcome, Ms. Murphy. You
Still
can,
muted.
you are muted, but we can see you.
How about that?
Perfect, thank you.
I apologize. Thank you. Good morning, commissioners and staff of the Colorado State Land Board. Thank you for the opportunity to present our concerns during this open public comment session. I'm Barbara Moss Murphy, the co-chair of Stop Full Send Bike Ranch, LLC. Given that I've lived on Shadow Mountain Drive for 40 years, my initial thinking was our car accidents and traffic problems alone would be enough to stop Full Send Bike Ranch. Sadly, many of these car accidents have occurred right in front of my house. We've had 3 fatalities on Shadow Mountain Drive, all not far from my house and between Jeffco Highway 73 and where the bike facility would be located. So I come to you today with one question regarding Full Send Bike Ranch development plan. There are pieces of this process which are unclear, confusing, and don't make sense to us. Our question is, what is the relationship between the Colorado State Land Board and Full Send Bike Ranch developers, Phil Burchard and Jason Evans? Because we have not been included in any of your processes to date, we had to submit several core reports to learn what was going on. In our humble opinion, we believe that the State Land Board and the Full Send Bike Ranch developers have a close working relationship. What we don't know is whether this is typical or a normal working relationship between the State Land Board and any developer. The State Land Board has consistently stated that its role is to simply provide the required acknowledgement to developers, and its role is not as a co-applicant or co-developer. Based on core requests we obtained from both the State Land Board and Jefferson County, the relationship between the State Land Board, Jefferson County, and the developers appears far more complex and not just merely providing the required acknowledgements. I'd like to present 2 examples to you that to us illustrate the very dynamics and close relationship between the State Land Board and the developers. On September 21st, 2021, Greg Ochis sent an email to Abe Medina, and I quote, "Nice presentation. My only comment would be that we probably be well served not to call the building a lodge. I suspect that the opponents will seize on that word. I would have called it ticket sales, restrooms, or something like that. Later that day, Phil Bouchard responded to Abe and said, and I quote, "We have said publicly that we plan to build the lodge, so that cat may be out of the bag on that one." Next is an example of what appears to us, where the state land board is advising the developers under which planning and zoning process to submit their application, which we believe will be location and extent process. But even that has become less clear each time the developers talk with the media. The following quote is an email from Phil Bouchard to Abe Medina on December 4th, 2020. And I quote, "There are a few different routes we can take with the county to seek approval. Which one we take is determined partially by the lease structure we work out with your organization. Can we find some time to discuss what we learned in our pre-planning meeting and start discussing possible leasing arrangements?" Then in an email a few weeks later from Greg Ochis to Dylan Monk on January 11, 2021, Mr. Ochis says, and I quote, "The state land board member requests a meeting with Jefferson County Planning and Zoning team in order to share the state land board's thoughts regarding the county's proposed use of the location and extent process in conjunction with two current proposals. We believe that Full Send Bike Ranch is one of the two current proposals, and that this email again suggests that the state land board is acting in an advisory role. In summary, as your neighbors, we are asking you that, and more importantly, your staff, to take a good hard look at this proposed project. We also ask that instead of one, trying to figure out how to word things to make them appear more acceptable to the public. Two, using the location and extent process that only gives us 30 days from the day of submittal to learn what is being proposed in our neighborhood. And three, skipping over requiring vital studies that need to be conducted. We ask that you be more transparent because we expect the bar to be higher when the state is involved. Please exercise your duty of care to ensure that the bar will continue to be raised. Acknowledge that this project will, one, add hundreds of cars to a windy 2-lane road with many blind spots. Two, these additional cars will lead to increased accidents and fatalities. And three, our neighbors' lives will be at risk with no feasible wildfire evacuation plan, which will impact thousands of residents and potential mountain bikers, and no plan for emergency services when we need them, and they are being tied up by Full Send Bike Ranch. Please listen to the 2,000 plus neighbors along Shadow Mountain Drive and don't allow this project to continue. There are so many other locations that could handle a better bike park than Shadow Mountain Drive. Thank you for your time. And do you have any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Moss Murphy. We appreciate you being with us this morning.
And thanks for having me.
Nick, do we have any other questions?
At this time, I don't see any other hands raised.
All right, very good. All right, we're going to start moving through our agenda. Just to reiterate, we do have a hard stop at 1 today. We have some of our commissioners going over to the Senate chamber to be for their confirmation hearing. So their schedule trumps ours, I will say. Next announcements, Director Ryan. There are no announcements. And Natural Resources Director's report.
Vanessa Mazzal, can you promote? Oh, she's already there.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, folks. Thank
morning.
you. Thank you, commissioners. I appreciate it. For the record, this is Vanessa Mazzal from the Department of Natural Resources. I'm here on behalf of Director Dan Gibbs, who was unfortunately called away and couldn't participate today. And Doug Vilsack also had issues his apologies as well for missing the second month in a row because he had to backfill for Director Gibbs. So apologies for that. You get me again today, but I'll do my best to answer questions and be clear about our updates. In terms of COVID updates, I know we're a little bit tired of talking about this, but in light of the decreased COVID transmission, DNR has issued new mask guidance, now recommending that employees essentially follow local public health guidelines with respect to mask wearing. We're certainly still encouraging staff to wear masks as they feel comfortable when interacting with the public and in other scenarios. But in terms of requirements, they just need to follow the local health guidelines. We're also still encouraging staff to work from home as possible for them, unless they have specific tasks in the office, as we're transitioning to flexible workspace to reduce our footprint, our office building footprint per Governor Polis's direction. And as you are aware, boards and commissions have now have the ability to resume in-person meetings. Most of them so far are moving toward hybrid formats. They've seemed to appreciate the flexibility that the hybrid format has given, despite the logistical constraints. On March 1st, the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, COGCC, adopted new financial assurance rules as part of the rulemakings required under Senate Bill 19-181. So effective April 30th, these new rules will, ensure that operators have the financial capability to meet all of their obligations for cleanup through the development of a first ever individual operator specific financial assurance plan. So that will be, that's kind of a big new development. It increases financial assurances for transferred wells and inactive wells. It requires financial assurance accounts for new wells tied to the well upon transfer and then funded in the initial year of operations. It establishes a fund to clean up orphaned wells as a complement to funds being provided by the federal government under the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. It broadens access for local governments in terms of with regards to plugging wells, and develops a first in the nation out of service plugging program. And for the first time, the new rules will also be applicable to wells on federal land. So we're also hoping that the rules can serve as a model as the BLM itself considers reforming federal financial assurance requirements. DNR and OGCC are going to be continue to work with Senator Fenberg as the sponsor for a new orphan well enterprise legislation that is making its way through the state legislature. The Colorado State Forest Service released the 2021 report on the health of Colorado's forests earlier this month. It offers insights and analysis of Colorado's efforts to improve the health of forests and address wildfires and insect outbreaks and other conditions during persistently dry weather conditions. The agency also reports on how the Forest Service is ensuring critical investments made by Governor Polis and the state legislature recently will reach communities across Colorado. And the report is available on the State Forest Service's website. State Forester Matt McCombs will also be presenting information from the report to the Senate Ag Committee on March 31 and to the House Ag Committee on April 11th. Department of Interior Secretarial Order 3404, the U.S. Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, issued SO 3404 last year, declaring the term squaw, I'm going to use it once, a derogatory term, and established the Derogatory Geographic Names Task Force charged with considering replacement names for locations currently utilizing that term. The U.S. Geological Survey identified locations that utilize this term and published a list of suitable replacement names for these geographic features in the Federal Register recently. The task force has opened up a 60-day public comment process and a 90-day tribal consultation period as part of the secretarial order. And the Colorado Geographic Naming Advisory Board will be issuing recommendations and welcomes public input through the CGNAB's website. The Colorado State Wildfire Action Program recently issued a request for proposals for the new statewide workforce development grants on the week of January 11th, I believe, or sorry, 31st. And this new grant program will provide support for between 6 to 25 weeks of workforce crews from the Colorado Youth Corps and Department of Corrections SWIFT crews for up to $100,000 for wildfire mitigation or prescribed fire training. Importantly, these are there are no matching fund requirements for these grants, and so they're able to be utilized in their full capacity, and it doesn't require any additional commitments on the part of local governments. These training grants are focused on 10 strategic priority areas, and SWIFT crews will be available statewide through our partnership with the DOC. Projects funded through this grant program must be completed by December 31, 2023. As of the end of February, about $1,007,000 have been allocated to the internal DNR workforce development projects, and about $1.3 million was allocated to the external workforce development projects. On Monday, the Joint Budget Commission, during its figure setting, approved every decision item for the Executive Director's Office and for CPW, CWCB, and other divisions, with a few standard kind of technical modifications caveated, combined with the committee's previous actions for DRMS, and OGCC and the State Land Board. We managed to get the most ambitious budget request in our history approved in full, which is a huge accomplishment, and kudos to folks who are working on that from across our divisions. DNR's budget request includes increases to support outdoor recreation and conservation initiatives, protect and manage the state's scarce water resources, and expand outreach and engagement on important natural resource issues. It also includes the addition of, as we've discussed before, the proposal for a new tribal liaison position within DNR, and funding to implement recommendations in the CPW Big Game Policy Report, which includes new FTEs that will be working especially on land use issues and oil and gas at mitigation, and also operating funds for the new state park at Sweetwater Lake that will be up and running hopefully sooner or later. Moving on, the Outdoor Equity Grant Board is accepting applications through April 8th to fund programs that bring transformative change throughout communities. And these grants are designed to widen accessibility to the outdoors for Coloradans from underserved communities, and also to provide environmental, experiential, outdoor, and stewardship and conservation education for Colorado youth and families, and that address inequities that Coloradans face in accessing the outdoors. The board was created by the passage of HB 21-1318 last year, and it's composed of members representing communities that have faced barriers to outdoor access. And on a related note, the Parks and Wildlife Commission yesterday approved a $29 Keep Colorado Wild Pass under legislation that was passed last year. This pass, which is offered through the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles, as part of vehicle registrations, is less than 1/2 of the cost of the current state parks pass, which is very exciting. It makes our state parks and other public lands more accessible to more Coloradans, and will also generate more resources to support our natural resource and wildlife conservation efforts. Let's see, one other note, DNR spearheaded the state's public comments on a new federal Conservation and Stewardship Atlas, which I think we discussed a bit last week, that's being produced as part of the America the Beautiful, or also known as the 30 by 30 initiative for the nation. In short, we recommended that the administration consider broad definitions of stewardship and conservation actions that are benefiting climate and conservation outcomes on the ground, and serve to increase biodiversity. And that certainly includes, from our perspective, stewardship agreements and arrangements that are with grazers and other state land board users that are, or at least lessees that are really demonstrating on the ground benefits. And in addition, we recommended that the administration continue to be in very close discussion and coordination with states and tribes to ensure that our priorities are reflected in the way that they're describing conservation and the types of actions that they're capturing in this atlas. It will serve as a framework for the federal strategy on how they're going to implement this America the Beautiful initiative on the ground. So it's an important opportunity. And finally, DNR's legislative agenda is still working its way through the legislature. It includes the reauthorization of the Habitat Partnerships Program, reauthorization of the non-game species tax checkoff, protecting sensitive wildlife data in particular on private lands, and annual re-upping of the annual species conservation trust fund bill, an annual water projects bill, and I think that is going to be it. I think that's all I've got. Any questions? I'm happy to entertain questions or comments. What was that?
That was great, Vanessa. That was a lot
Thanks,
of
guys.
information. You said it very quickly. So
I
appreciate-
apologize. If I need to slow down or go back to anything, please let me know.
No, we're under a tight schedule. We appreciated the tempo. Any questions for Vanessa? I think we are good. Thank you again. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it.
We can just a break just for a second before we get into the meat of these things,
Yeah, sure.
please.
All right, let's do 5 minutes. Let's go ahead and get started, and I think we have just one more item before we start to get into some of the meat of our agenda, the staff report. Director Ryan.
Thank you, Commissioner Scanlon. Commissioners, the report was in your packets. If you have any questions, please ask, but I'll highlight a couple of things. One, Vanessa talked about some of the return to office things. Our staff is back in the office 2 days a week now. That's consistent with what the city's doing. It's consistent with what the governor's office is doing. There are some individual state departments that are doing some different things, but I really feel like our culture is important here, and it's created and built by being together. And so I've asked that our team commit to 2 days a week in the office.
Okay, Clark, that's the team in Denver. The district offices have
Thank you.
actually been, our staff have been staffed for a long time now, 3 days a week, Monday through Wednesday, in person with the district assistant, and by appointment Thursday, Friday. So we try to make it clear we're open for business. District managers, as always, resource assistants are in the field 90% of the time, but they're still spending time in the office.
I want to call your attention also to the permanent fund, because this is important to the bill we're working on. For the calendar year, there was a meeting of the Permanent Fund Investment Board at the end of February. For the calendar year 2021, our $1.35 billion permanent fund returned 3.7%. I think that's disgraceful. It's a function of the asset allocation of the fund, and the bill that we are trying to get through the legislature is an effort to resolve any concerns on the manager's part that are restricting the ability to invest this further into equities. The equity index that we measure ourselves against in that fund, so the equity portion of our fund, returned 18.9% in the calendar year. Had we had more of a 50-50 or 60-40 mix there, this could have grown by $200 million last year, and it didn't. And so I think for me, it underscores the importance of getting House Bill 1146 through. And I want to ask you 5 commissioners to do whatever you can to support that. I'll be reaching out to you individually. We think that bill will be introduced on March 24th. And we're trying to we're trying to figure out how to get some things that were deleted from the first draft of the bill put back in that are integral to doing what we're trying to do here. So I may reach out to you all individually for assistance with that. But as fiduciaries of a trust, I sure want to see that grow. I think not only does that enable us to meet our intergenerational need of providing for future generations, but over the long term, if we can make changes to the distribution policy, it's going to increase distributions. So anyway, calling your attention to that. Lastly, in our staff update, I want to announce 2 departures that are big shoes to fill in both cases. Barb Fiedler has elected to retire, and she is moving at the end of the month. And Alicia Hawthorne is needing to move to Ohio to be closer to her parents who need her help. And so we are very sad to lose both of those little feet in really big shoes. And thank you both for all of your service. Alicia, I'm looking around as though I'm going to see you, but you're not in here. But Barb, thank you both very much for your years of service here. You will both be very much missed.
Can I talk about additions?
We can, go ahead.
So as of yesterday, we had found a replacement for the district office assistant in Alamosa. We're really excited about that person joining us in a couple of weeks. We are interviewing for the open resource specialist position that will either be housed in Eaton, or we're willing to accommodate somebody in Sterling if we have the best applicant there. So we're near that. And we have, it looks like, a good host of applicants for the open Southeast District Manager position. So we're making progress on all those.
And Barb, you're replaceable. And as is Alicia, we will miss you both.
Yeah.
We'll applaud Alicia when I think she's on our agenda today, so we can give her.
Guest appearance.
We can give her a standing ovation. Okay, let's move forward with William Woolston, and this is tab 6 on your agenda. Request for review, Yuma County. Welcome, William.
Thank you. For the record, William Woolston, Field Operations Team Leader. Good morning, Commissioners. It's my pleasure to present the request for review of staff decision.
William, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to point out for the commissioners and for folks who are watching, Aaron is the attorney for the board in this matter. Ed Hamrick, who has been advising the staff, remains the staff attorney, but we want to make sure there wasn't any concerns about conflict. And so we've got attorneys playing different roles for this matter. So thank you.
Yeah.
Aaron, welcome.
And thank you, Director Ryan, for that clarification. William.
I'm here to present the request for review of staff decision of Ag Lease 114-332 this morning. Arrow, please. I'd like to make some introductions before we go forward. We have Mr. Jeff Keir, the Keir Brothers attorney, in the room with us this morning, as well as a group from Keir Farms led by Mr. Greg Keir. And I asked Greg if he would introduce the rest of his group later on when they come up for presentation. And we also have Lens Farms represented by Mr. Russ Heyer and Mr. Marty Boyd on, they are joining us virtually. They will present later as well. I'm going to give you some background on this decision, a timeline of the renewal process on this lease. We'll go over the bid evaluation process, how we approach that, and also give you the recommendation, and then we'll ask your brothers to come forward for comments, as well as Lens Farms. So the lease is located in the northeastern part of Colorado and Yuma County, very close to the Nebraska border. This is just a little bit closer view of that area. You can see Ray, Colorado at the bottom of the screen. It's just north. The lease is in red, just northeast of Ray. Again, quite close to the Nebraska border. And you can also tell from this slide, all those green circles are irrigation pivots. So there's a huge amount of irrigation in that area, which makes up a good portion of this lease as well. This is a close-up of the lease that we're discussing this morning. And you can see hopefully on the screen, the circles, if you will, scattered throughout the lease, some of them in blue, circled in blue, some not, but those are all the irrigated pivots that are on this parcel. The blue insignias indicate wells that are on the parcel. The native range that's in between the pivots is where the grazing occurs, and those are where the grazing AUMs are located, obviously. I delineated where the home site is for you, just off the side of one of the pivots, 5.8, I believe. And then just below them are the grain bins. They are located both just off the main road that comes into this parcel from the county road. This lease is surrounded by approximately 6 landowners that are, in various locations around the lease, but it's in a large agricultural area. A lot of ag producers in that area. So I'll go over the timeline with you on this lease briefly. The lease expired December 31st, 2021. On June 14th of 2021, Kier Brothers were notified of the lease violation for overpumping of one of the state land board water wells. On June 30th of 21, the land board received a competitive bid from Lands Farms on this lease. July 28th of 2021, Kier Brothers were notified of the competing bid that we had received, and also were notified at that time of the loss of the right to match the competing bid that had come, any competing bids that had come in on the lease. At that time, or shortly thereafter, Kier Brothers asked for a request for review of that decision, and that, as you know, came before the board in the October 10th, 2021 meeting. In that meeting, the board found that Kier Brothers had violated the lease due to overpumping of the wells permit. The land board had received a highest and best offer from Kier Brothers on August 9th, 2021. After that board decision, that bid came into the record, and that brings us that we had the 2 competing bids at that time, and then we moved forward with the evaluation of the lease at that time. The 2 bids that we received are noted here for you. Lands Farms bid $236,000.61. Kier Brothers bid $225,820. This is a chart that I'm going to go through with you that'll just outline what made up the bids for the 2 different competitive bids that we received. They were bid slightly differently to us, and we thought it would just be valuable to go through that process. On the left side, there are the different components that were bid in the lease. The top 3 are part of the cropland: the fully irrigated, semi-irrigated, and dry land, then the grazing, the home site, and the grain bins. So I'll go ahead and drop in the values. As you can see on the cropland, the 2 parties bid for the cropland in different ways. The Lands Farms did some evaluation and gathered some information on the availability of water in the different wells on the different pivots, the different irrigated pivots that were available, and made a determination on value that they felt were quite fitting, as I understand, based on that information. And thus you see the 3 different: the fully irrigated, the semi-irrigated, and the dry land. The Kier Brothers chose to bid the full 1,033 irrigated acres at a single flat rate. So that gives you that's why those 2 bids are different. On the grazing bid, both parties bid on 524 AUMs, which is what has been allocated to the lease by the land board. The home site, they both bid an annual rent basis bid. As you can see, it's slightly different, but they both bid the same way. On the grain, and then that brought us to a subtotal of 224,800 for Lens and 208,420 for Kier Brothers. The grain were bid somewhat differently. The grain bins, Lens bid 11,200 on the grain bins. Kier Brothers listed included on their bid. So given that the annual rent bid on their bid was 225,000, the landlord took the difference between the subtotal and that total and applied it to the grain bids. So when we went out to do, three members of staff went out to do the standard competitive bid evaluation. And when we do that, we evaluate on revenue, stewardship, and stability of the local community. 40% for revenue, 40% for stewardship, and 20% for stability of the local community. And we did this evaluation like we do any other evaluation. Staff did follow all appropriate policy, procedures, and guidelines in this process. Lens Farms submitted the highest financial bid. The evaluators were divided as to which applicant demonstrated the best stewardship. Although I would say the stewardship on from both of these applicants was very high, and the differences in our scoring was very, very small. Both applicants were determined to be equal in regard to the stability of the local agricultural community. They both are very active in their communities. Staff awarded the lease to the bidder with the highest cumulative score, and in this case, that was Lens Farms. So with that, before I bring Kier Brothers up to speak, are there any questions that you have for me before we go to the next step?
See
Okay. With that, I will. Greg, would you like to come up?
Yeah.
Let's see. Sure.
So my name is Greg Kier. This is my brother Jeff. Also here today is my brother Mark and my cousin Jonas Kier.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate the opportunity to be heard and deal with this issue. I wish I was here on better terms, but I certainly appreciate giving us the chance to speak. I want to briefly address the litigation. I know you had an executive session on that this morning. And while that was never something we wanted to do, we felt like we had no options. Back into a corner. It appeared that Lens was going to be granted the lease at the January meeting. We believed we had the higher bid. And so we took that action. So something that wasn't taken lightly, but it is what it is. I understand we're in a time crunch, so I don't want to rehash a bunch of stuff, and I don't want to waste your time. I think it is important to understand the impact of this decision to our family farm, and to provide that, understanding. I think some historical context would be helpful. This state ground was actually part of a ranch. That ranch was called Caribou Land and Cattle. My father and my three uncles purchased that ranch in 1997, 98. Prior to that purchase, Caribou Land and Cattle had swapped these circles that we're discussing today for some state land in Bolton County, if I'm correct on all that. And the reason I tell you that is I think this land was instrumental to this entire ranch, and that swap happened. And then I also think it's important to note that on this ranch, there was over 100 wells, and my father and his brothers sold 2/3 of the wells on this ranch. And I think that's important historically because in the basin, in the Republican River Basin, we obviously have a compact compliance issue. That project with the pipeline that the Republican River bought those wells and pumped them all into a pipeline. And so while we never expect any thank you card from anybody in the basin, it is pretty clear that we're able to pump in the Republican River Basin because of that project. We certainly didn't anticipate at our generation the hell that we would pay for that sale of water and continue to pay. I apologize, I may get emotional about that. It's been a struggle at our generation. We didn't receive any of the proceeds from that sale. We certainly received a lot of the debt. And I give you that context because I want you to understand how important this decision is to this family. We've given up 2/3 of the irrigated ground so that the rest of the basin can pump. They obviously were paid for that water, but this irrigated ground is extremely significant to us. I'm not going to rehash the overpumping issue. We addressed that in October, but I've got some new information. I will briefly say that the overpumping happened because the corn was going to dry up. If any one of you made a call to the Republican Water Conservation District, they would tell you there was numerous overpumpings and numerous overpumpings on leased ground, not just something someone else has the water right for. I still don't believe that's a violation of the lease, but the board made that decision in October. I have discovered, and I brought it up in October, but I've discovered that I believe the state land board has had other overpumpings. I have found 3 overpumpings that have happened, but this is the first time the state land board has called that a violation of the lease and actually taken that statutory right. And I can't express how important that statutory right is to match. And I've got one from in my packet here that I can share with you. Sprague Farms in Yuma County overpumped in 2013, and their lease was renewed in 2015, and they didn't lose their statutory right. We overpumped in 2020, and we lose our statutory right to match in 2021. I also think that it's significant that in the evaluations, we lose points for that overpumping. It feels like to me, you're being punished twice. Not only do you take away this invaluable right to match, but then you lose points again in the evaluation process for overpumping. In the litigation, there's a footnote in one of the pleadings from the Attorney General's office that makes note of how many acre feet we overpumped and then puts that to gallons and it says 15 million gallons. Like we're the boogeyman because we overpumped 15 million gallons. I think, again, the Colorado Division of Natural Resources, it's a 1-for-1 remedy. And so I want to tell you what happened in 2021. We now have final numbers for that. We actually underpumped. So we were reduced by what we'd overpumped. And we underpumped a total of 76.6 acre feet. So we saved 76.6 acre feet, 24 million gallons that we could have pumped, that we didn't. I think this is significant because this is why the Division of Water Resources allows a 1-for-1 remedy. You're in a drought year, you don't have a lot of choices. You either let your corn burn up. If you let your corn burn up, you lose your crop insurance. I'm a federal crop insurance agent. If you have access to water, you have to water it. We still have to pay the rent on the lease. And so Division of Natural Resources, we get that. And Yuma County Groundwater District actually has it in their rules. In drought years, we understand you're going to have to make that choice. So in the next year, we're going to make up for that. Your Brothers made up for it, big time, 76.6. The total overpumping was about 47. And my 76 includes all that. And I can give you those total numbers.
I have a question. Commissioner Chavez, does that 76 acre feet carry over to this year? Or
it does not, because it just, yep, it doesn't add to your permitted amount. If that's the question.
Yeah, your allocation.
Yeah. But I think it's important to show that, you know, in the last year of the lease, we did the right thing by a long ways. We reduced our stand and we took care of business in a year that we could do that. All of that said, I think we're here today to decide who had the higher bid and what that evaluation looked like. And I want you to look at in your tab. Yeah. Page 28 of 202. To me, this whole issue comes down to, on the evaluations, if the revenue was swapped, Cure Brothers would get the lease. This was the bid that we submitted. There was a lot of discussion about this bid and whether it should be submitted at all because we had the statutory right to match and we felt that would be upheld. I encouraged the family to go ahead and in the alternative submit this bid. This form is a state land board form that came to us. The form is a little squirrely. If you look at it, it's not the way I would have wanted that bid to come back to me. My brother Greg filled this form out, and the state land board from the grid that was put up, the spreadsheet that was put up, they are taking, staff is taking the grain bins and just plugging in 17,000. That's not what this form says. There's no total amount of rent on this form. What is clear from the four corners of the bid is that Greg wrote 225,820. He wrote 12,000, and he wrote included. The staff is treating the included and the 12,000 the same. There wouldn't be any reason for him to make that distinction if he wanted them to be treated the same. His intent was to add the 12,000 to the 225,820. That's why we've been saying that we've had the highest bid for quite some time now.
So you're saying, this is Commissioner Chavez again, that you're putting a value in the grain bins of 29,400?
No, the value on the grain bins was zero. Included meant it was included in the other numbers. So if we were going to do math, we would put zero on that. It was included somewhere else.
It just, and I'm just asking a question. It doesn't make sense. I mean, you have 180 for the acre for the land. That's 185. The AUMs, that's 195, or whatever, more or less. I mean, you have to have a value somewhere because your 180 and your 20 are, I mean, those are written right there, $180.20.
Yeah, there's certainly a calculation mistake, no doubt about it. But I'm asking you to forget about the calculation and look at the numbers that were written down and what they meant. There's a calculation problem, definitely. And Greg can go into this further about why there's a calculation problem. That do you want to discuss the acres? And I mean, there's not even 1,033 acres on this property. There's 962 irrigated acres. We dropped a tower off of two sprinklers about 4 years ago, but we've continued to pay for 1,033 irrigated acres, and staff knows that. So there was a lot of numbers. When you don't have the inputs, when you don't list the asset and what exactly they are, there was a lot of input numbers that were being thrown around, and there's a calculation problem. But I'm saying when you write included and you write $12,000, if I'm doing the math, I would say I'm going to add 225,820. I'm going to do zero for included because it's already in there. But I'm going to say the 12,000 is different, right? Why wouldn't I have just wrote included on the home site rent too?
No, and I appreciate that. So how many acres are you basing this $180 on?
Yeah, we
1,033. That's for the 20 years we've had that lease. It's been 1,033 irrigated acres. In 2018, we took two spans off of 5.7, and I got a map here. Or maybe you can pull that. Can we pull that back up so you can see Exactly what's.
I think this is relevant. I just want to say this. I think this is relevant in explaining why we had a calculation problem, but it's not really that relevant to how somebody should interpret this form. And I could see how staff would say, yeah, we maybe should have sent a better form, and he maybe should have done better math. Let me pick up the phone and make sure I understand what the math is. I'm not going to just supplant a number that I decide for the words included. And I'm saying the 12,000 and the included, that there was a distinction made there. So you can't treat them
And
the
I
same way.
appreciate that. This is Commissioner Chavez again. But you still have how did you come up with $225,820?
Me, myself on this sheet, I knew what we would pay in past annual rent invoices. So the highest of that was about 224,000. So we were all in the room. I put down the 225, I said, okay, and I tried to work back into it, and I didn't get that right, but I knew that. And at that point in time, I knew we had a hired hand living in that house. So I knew we had to put a number to the house. The bins, when I did included, we don't use the bins. We put up 2 new bins because of storms that have, per our lease that we had to, we put up 2 bins of 57,000, but we don't really use the bins. I mean, they're not, we harvest corn and put it in a bunker, and that's what we do. So I said, well, yeah, we're not really putting a value there, but I knew we had to put something towards the house. So that's what we did.
Commissioner Heath has her hand up.
Thank you, Commissioner Heath.
You're muted, Commissioner Heath.
We're working on it.
Oh,
Thank you. Just a question for you, Mr. Kerr. Are you saying that your bid should have been 225,820 plus 12,000?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And I'm asking you to look at that bid objectively and forget about all the other information and decide what you thought his intent was. The Attorney General's office has said that there's revisionary history, that we created confusion. I will say it's unfortunate that this form is set up the way this form's set up. It's unfortunate that there was so much talk about what are we actually bidding on. And it's unfortunate that Greg made a calculation error. But if you just look at the 4 corners of the bid and the distinction between the grain bins and the homestead, I think it's clear that our total bid is 237,820, which is $1,800 higher than the Lynn's bid.
Can I go back to the 5.7, the circle 5.7 up there? We took 2 spans off of it. So actually today, what we certify with USDA and what we certify with insurance is 962 irrigated acres on that farm. We've been paying 1,033 the whole 20 years. That happened in 2018 is when we did that. We also have the recreation lease on this property. Those acres are 2575. I'm not sure of the discrepancy there, but we pay $5 an acre on the 2575. We've done that since 2016. You may ask why we did the recreation lease. It was a gentleman from Wichita. We had to do a competitive bid. We went in 10-cent increments. We're not hunters. We're not, but we do some stuff with the Boy Scouts there. But I mean, we wanted to make sure that it was intact and there wasn't being overrun by a bunch of different people, because in that area that's a hotbed for big deer, and that's the deal there. And I'm going to say again, I think that that's only relevant to explain why we had so many numbers on board and he had a calculation problem. I don't want to waste your time, your schedule. I don't think it's that really relevant. I think if you look at this form objectively and you see the distinction,
We bid 237,820, which is the higher bid. And because of some of these things that you've had over pumpings before, you've never taken anybody's statutory rights before. This is the first time, from my knowledge, and other things along the way, it feels like we're not on a level playing field. If I would have looked at this form as staff, I would have picked up the phone and I'd have said, heck, we shouldn't have used this form. Mr. Cure, what exactly, it would have been no harm to the Liz family. What exactly did you bid? I'm not coming up with the math. I would have not taken my own number and supplanted it for his number. He didn't bid $17,000 for the grain test. He doesn't even use them.
2020, did, in all 8 wells, were you even with the state or were you negative? You included all of them?
In 2020 or 2021? We would have been, in 2020, we would have been over. I think they were all permitted to their limit. It was a drought. I mean, the whole basin overpumped. So we would have been over by.
Are you just speaking of the 2 wells?
No, all of them, all 8.
All of it. We would have been over by 47 acre feet.
Positive. Or you could have pumped 47 more acre feet.
No, we would have overpumped.
Overpumped 47.
In 2020.
All of them.
In 2021.
Yeah, you're 76.
Yes. I mean, we underpumped in 2021 over 120 acre feet in 2021. And I just think that's significant. When the remedy to overpumping in permit is a 1-to-1, they expect you in times of necessity to do that as long as you take care of it the next year. And there's lots of ways to take care of that. And your brothers took care of it.
We raised corn on these circles, so when it came into the 2021 season, we already knew our allocation was pulled back 1-to-1. So we make adjustments to make sure we don't get in that situation or we don't have to, that's what you plan for. You hope you're not trying to make a call and say, listen, we got to go another 2 acre feet or, I know that's been done in years past, not particularly with us, but I know there's been some farmers that have done that. You're just trying to plan to make sure that you're not put in that situation. We've never pushed the issue on 5-7 once we took the 2 spans off. And, it's really 962 irrigated acres. We've never called up Wilbur and say, hey, Wilbur, this lease has got to be 962 irrigated acres. We've never done that. We've always paid the 1,033.
It's always been such a good relationship. So now we feel like there's some reason it's not anymore. And that's unfortunate. But I think the main reason we're here today is who had the higher bid. I think that would swap the points in the evaluation. And I'm asking you to look at the bid sheet objectively and make a determination from that bid sheet what our bid was.
I'd also like to point out, I mean, this is I can give you, I mean, this state ground, like I said, in 98 or so, it flipped, but this is our ranch, but these circles they're gone. I mean, that's why it's important. We still own this ground, but I mean, you can see that. The dark brown is, am I missing anybody? Anybody want one?
Give them please to Barb to make sure it's part of our record.
So you can see how adjacent it is to us, and that's why it's important. But as you're looking there, I mean, there's a lot of those wells that are not, I mean, that's pasture ground.
You could see it on Williams satellite image. Should we go to that other, the divots are gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can kind of see it there. You see your, if you go north of the red landmass there, the state land board, there's another state section that we don't have up there in blue. So you can kind of see that those circles have been retired there. That's the orange you're seeing on the map.
And all of that water is going into a pipeline and being pumped into Kansas and Nebraska. Again, only relevant for historical context and the fact that 2/3 of what they were farming was sold for compact compliance. And now we're talking about another 962 acres. So the decision is extremely important to us. I don't envy you. A lot of you. I know they're all.
We don't either.
I think that's all we have.
It's very important to us though. I mean, that's very important to us. So
Any questions for us?
I don't see any at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you. William, should we hear from Lynn's Farms and then open it up to a more full board discussion?
Does that suit you?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll introduce Lance, I think.
They're on and the line's open.
Hello, my name is Russ Heyer, representing Lynn's Farms.
Marty Bowie, also representing Lynn's Farms.
First, we'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present, and thank you for the option of doing it virtually. We wish we could have been there in person, but due to calving season and the inclement weather, we felt it was best to stay home. So thank you for the opportunity to present via Zoom.
I know Russ had submitted some information to you all, a short bio on the farm. This also so pumping information. Have you all seen that or have access to that?
That was distributed to the commissioners before the meeting.
Yes.
Okay, so in the name of time, I won't completely rehash the bio. That kind of lays out who Lynn's Farms are, what we are, and why we are part of Yuma County. So we'll just move on from there. Would like to approach, first of all, why we approach this lease. Obviously, we are a large family operation, always looking to bring other individuals into the operation, which, as you all probably know, requires land base. And this was a very attractive lease based off the size and location to our operation. We had been inquiring and been on the state website as far as some other leases that would be up in our area, and happened to see that the Cure lease was becoming up this year. So when we applied for this lease, we had no understanding of any of the water pumping issues or any of the underlying things that have since come to light as far as regard to the state land board's evaluation of this lease. We evaluated it strictly on what we thought would benefit us economically, and what a number, when we bid that number, what we thought would we could make work and cash flow to accentuate what we're doing as an operation. So I just wanted to clear that up. I'll let Russ handle the water consumption part. The one thing when we did the evaluations, when they came out and evaluated the operations, there was not a lot of time spent, and it's not reflected in the evaluation scores as far as stewardship of water resources. I think this whole thing has brought forth how much value that the state land board puts on being good stewards of the Ogallala aquifer, and how important it is to drive the economic engine of Yuma County and the entire basin. So we've always kind of prided ourselves as Lynn's Farms in being a very conservative and well-managed operation. We can't speak to this ground that the state land board owns and Cures have been operating, because we have not been on that ground. We do farm a lot of ground very similar to it. All of our operation is in the Sand Hills, so we feel like we have a very good understanding of what can be done on sandier soils to help conserve water and utilize that resource as much as possible. I guess before I move on, is there any questions regarding our operation or anything you would like to know about Lynn's Farms before we move into the water presentation?
I am not seeing any questions at the moment.
Okay, I will turn it over to Russ.
Per the enclosures that I attached, provided to you last week, I think you see pumping usage in acre feet in a 10-year time period from 2011 to 2020 for both Lynn's Farms wells, which would be located in the Sandhills, as well as the 8 wells located on the state lease property. Please note that there's a total of 29 wells being operated on the Lynn's Farms portion. If you'll notice in the bottom right of that attachment, our average consumption in inches per acre is 18.05 inches over that 10-year time frame. In the same time period on the state lease on those 8 wells, average consumption is 22.44 inches, which would be a 24% increase from our consumption. To Mr. Cure's point about the overpumping in 2020 and the basin-wide drought, I would note that our usage in that same year across 29 wells was 18.1 inches versus 27.1 inches per acre on the state lease in that same year that he was referencing. So I just wanted to make sure you guys had seen that and clear up. You know, we have multiple operators and our irrigation load is spread out across several different irrigators. And we believe that our labor and management experience and being able to put considerable effort on a personal basis into watching wells leads us to manage our water resources, as Marty alluded to, that are very important to this entire basin very well.
You want to address the lease?
As far as the bid sheet, I respect Mr. Clear's point that the form was slightly unclear. I guess that's why we attached a separate schedule specifically spelling out how we bid different acres. And those acres were determined via the web soil survey tool online. I don't know if you as commissioners have been exposed to that or not, but through the prior lease and seeing that there's 1,033 acres allocated of farm ground, and then using a measurement tool and just doing geometry to figure out how many acres were approximately on each field. That's how we came up with our number of acres to total the 1,033 and splitting up the classifications based on fully irrigated versus semi-irrigated versus dry land. As Mr. Cure alluded to, the 2 towers being dropped off the end of one system. So that's kind of how we came to our split of acres and why I submitted a separate schedule so that there was clarity in how we were bidding the different asset classes.
Any other questions? Like I said, we truly appreciate the transparency of the land board, and that was one of the attractive things of this lease is the thought process and the thoroughness you guys go in evaluating the leasees, and the full transparency, I think, is why this is such an attractive deal, because it really levels the playing field and I'm assumed is aimed to take a lot of the emotion and the grayness out of establishing who should have right to rent property and who should not.
We appreciate your time and the opportunity to present with you and the opportunity to be involved to this point. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the commission?
One question, this is Commissioner Chavez, on the water usage, that's the same crops, all corn, equal crops on the comparison?
Thank you for your question, Commissioner Chavez. No, that would be averaged across all of our crops in our rotation. So that'd be corn, edible beans, and potatoes, all averaged together across that 10-year time frame. And there'd be approximately, you know, I can't tell you for sure, but would be approximately 4 pivots of potatoes each year amongst those 29 wells.
Thank you.
Jeff Cure again. Can I just make one point of clarification? Is that all right? The Lynn's Farms was not provided the same bid form. They filled out the competitive bid lease application. I want to make sure that's clear. That bid form that's confusing did not go to Lynn's Farms. It only came to us when we were told that our preferential rights was lost and that we needed to issue a competitive bid. Mr. Lynn's made it sound like they wanted to clear up the confusion, but that form only came to us and we used it. Staff sent that to us.
Clear?
William, do you have any follow-on?
I'm sorry.
Any follow-on comment to the different forms?
I believe it was. I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me at the moment.
Sorry, thank you.
Can I comment, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have some follow-on later, but.
Yeah, not specific to that question. Yes.
All right, so in the competitive bid application, which is included as page number 23 or 24, excuse me, of your packet, you'll see new applicant competitive bid offer, and in my handwriting, please see attached bid detail sheet. So I would say that there's even less room to fill out how you want to bid particular classes of assets on this competitive bid form than there is on the renewal form. There's no room for improvements. It gives a grazing land and a cropland, and thus why I submitted a detailed schedule with the different classes of land and a value on the improvements.
No, thank you. Any other questions for Lynn's Farms? All right, I don't see any at the moment, but thank you for hanging on. All right, William.
Thank you. You go back. I would like to.
Commissioner Heath has her hand up.
Well, perhaps Mr. Wilson's going to speak to this, but I have a question for staff about these forms. Did I understand that the form that is on page 28, which was used by the Cure family, is the standard form for existing lessees, and that there's a different form for people who are submitting a competitive bid? Is that correct?
So yes, that is correct.
And so on this form, I found myself unsure about whether the 12,000 should be added to the 225,820. When you all evaluated it, did you discount the 12,000, or did you consider it to be a part of the 225? I guess because there's not a total on this sheet, I was unclear about really what was their bid.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's what I'd like to address that now, if I could, to clarify how we look at the sheet and how we read what to us is relatively a normal sheet.
All right.
I'll go there.
Would you go through the table again first?
Go through the table?
Yeah. And then I think you can show the other example of how you work to.
Okay. Sorry. The table at the bottom.
No, I think we should spend this. This is the issue, so it's helpful to spend the time.
So in going through the table, again, this did show the cropland. It shows the different ways to competitive bidders looked at it. Grazing's the same. The home site's the same. When it came to the grain bins, and I'll go back and I'll tell you why we included, because we had nowhere else to go with the value. The annual bid, which is, I'm going to go there now and show you on that. So on the Cure Brothers proposed annual rent at the bottom, the annual rent, the listing of the annual rent, the first column, that is our normal column. That is what we expect to see. That is where we expect to see the bid that we received on a parcel. This parcel had more parts to it than most of the parcels do. Thus the four other lines that follow. Those were components the three people, I'll put it this way, the three people who evaluated this lease, as well as the staff in Sterling, had clarity on what the rent was bid on this lease. We all looked at this and saw the bid to be $225,820 because that's what we expect to see. And that's how we read these. The others were components of that total. And you can't, it's, if you take all of the components, as I did in the chart, you need all of the components to get to the $225,820 bid. And I'd also like to address the, the Cure Brothers, the claim that they evidently made in the hearing. I was not at the hearing, but that's what's been stated today as well. When I took a look at the bid, and they also stated, I'll explain the grazing bid part of this. They also stated that they had bid on the acres rather than the AUMs, as I understood, which is more than double the number that the grazing bid would be if it had been bid on the AUMs. So I went ahead and took it from that standpoint and broke it down. And as Commissioner Chavez, I believe, was alluding to in his questions, if you take the $180 for the irrigated, the grazing bid at the higher rate, that gives you $213,880 total. Add the home site, you get $225,880. The Cure stated today that the grain bids were meant to be included and no value added there. And if that's the case, then I don't understand how they get to a higher bid. I can't do that math.
So you flip, this is Assistant Director Okish, will you flip back to the bid sheet? So staff, 3 independent people looked at this, and on the bottom of the screen, underneath where it says Cure Brothers proposed annual rent, all 3 of them independently saw annual rent of $225,820, consisting of $180 per irrigated acre, $20 per AUM, $12,000 for a home site, and the grain bins included in the $225,820. Do I understand you correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
That's,
and when we learned later that there might have been an error in the way the grazing rent was calculated, that it might have been $20 per acre instead of $20 per AUM. Go to the next slide. You tried to do that math.
correct.
And ended up with the same, so a very similar outcome, $225,000, because there's no rent included for the grain bins as written.
And I would stress ours.
I'm sorry, did I understand correctly?
Yes, you did. But I would stress normally what we look, the annual rent is what is normally, and I believe people are used to placing as the total bid.
Commissioner Chavez, so you or somebody received, you guys, Wilbur received this on October or August 9th of 2020, the bid at the 2. Did anybody reach out to the Cures and say for clarification?
No. We did not. We did not, because we felt that would be showing favoritism. And we also, as I would say, we also were clear in the total, which is really the number that matters the most in the total bid, the $225,820 annual rent.
Yes, thank you. So I recognize that there's clarity among the staff in terms of the form, and that annual rent would be the total. And as I'm looking at the other calculations you're doing here, you're saying that whether you do this, the grazing piece based on AUM or acreage, it doesn't increase the value to the point that the Cures are presenting it would be.
I could not get it there.
So, but part of this to be as well is that while there was clarity among the staff, and that's understandable as well, because this is the landlord's forum, and you see this more often. I guess I'm trying to understand, and as I look at, so I'm focused on of the staff report, pages 17 and 19, where 17 is the summary of the individual reviewers scoring, and then 19 has that same, just that total piece that's also on the form that's in our packets under page 28. And understanding that there's 1 point deducted for the previously determined lease violation. But if there weren't that level of clarity or seeming, certainty rather, about the total rent value, if it were adding the 12,000 in homesite rent and that being 237,820, then that point would be offset because the revenue for Cure Brothers would have been 7 and Lens would be 6 instead of it being the other way around. And they are so close. It's essentially the one that was a tie with Rachel Brooks would then be 47 for Cure Brothers, 40. Am I doing that right? 40. Anyway, and then yours would be a tie. So I'm just trying to understand. It does feel so close, and I do see a basis for, I guess it's one thing if we're saying we're so certain that this is what it was, but if the Cure Brothers, if their family is saying that their intent was 237, I struggle with us calling it revisionist history now, given that these are the numbers that were presented then. However they came about, they are now confirming to us that their bid is 237. And it's not like the numbers don't exist here. So are you saying that there's just no possible way that that is valid, that was their intent?
Staff, this is Assistant Director Okish, I'm speaking because I've spent an enormous amount of time with staff on this one. We read the form saying, what is your annual rent? Our annual rent is $225,000. That seems very clear to us, and it seems very clear to 3 people who saw this independently and read the template, and they all read it as, and that consists of this much for irrigated, this much for grazing, and this much for a home site.
But independently is land board staff?
They looked at, they didn't collude. They didn't all get together and say, how do you read it? How do you read it?
Right, but it's
I don't
not
agree,
an
but I'll put
outside
that
person.
down.
Correct.
I think you heard the Cure Brothers say they made an error in their calculation. We don't know where that is. I mean, they're saying it was, we failed to add them together. We can look at it 3 different ways. That's the 2 that Williams presented that say, it just doesn't make any sense. It looks, we're saying it's after the fact because we're saying they didn't come forward with the argument that it was 237 until after they saw the Lens bid as part of the litigation that's going on. So after they saw the competing bid, after we told them they lost it, they then come forward and said, that's not what we meant.
But
So
why would they have? Because they didn't know there was.
I'm just saying, you're asking us. I can't speak to what they're doing conclusively or what was going through their minds. You're asking, I think, staff, why didn't we call them? I can turn that around and say, why didn't they call us if there was any confusion about what to fill in where? The other party certainly took that opportunity. So all of that is not to be defensive. I can't answer your question.
And I'm not, and that's not so much. I think the key though for me at this point is that regardless of how this happened, the numbers are here and they're telling us today that their bid is 237. And so if we would accept that, regardless of how these savings came about, if they're saying that based on the numbers that are also in front of us, they're not presenting brand new numbers to increase it to above it. They're saying this was our intention. we did some miscalculation, our bid is 237, then that would have changed that 1 point on
It
the
would have
revenue
changed it.
side.
I'm just saying, you are free to reach that conclusion in your own. That is.
Yeah, no, I'm not
staff's
asking you to-
No, that's not staff's conclusion.
Understood. I'm just, yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for the question, and I'll go back to this, and I think I'll go back to the issue that I had when we worked through this was, if you take the numbers on the far right side, the far right total line, those are the 4 components that make up the annual rent bid as placed on their sheet. You can more easily get lower than you can higher, and that was why we felt confident that 225,820 was the total. We just filled in the number, for the grain bins, because that was what was missing. But we couldn't get higher.
So I guess, yeah, what I'm struggling with is that the Lynn's bid came in appropriately, not because there was any other review or violation happening, showing at the time it was that they saw that a lease would be ending at the end of the year and put something forward. Is that accurate? We get through this process, we now have these 2 bids. And again, regardless of, because I understand what you're saying in terms of the calculation of trying to get there. But also a part of our process is a request for review. And we have someone in front of us who is saying that regardless of these other things, we intend for our bid to be this other amount. And there aren't all of the other breakdowns here from their side to dispute that. So that's what if I'm bottom lining it, I'm trying to look at, yeah. Yes.
And then I want to get to Commissioner Chavez, but if you want.
Yeah, I just want to jump in here, and then for the record, this is Assistant Attorney General Aaron O'Connell. I think the real issue is whether or not the intention is tantamount to amendment of the bid. And I understand that there's external evidence is being submitted as part of what the bid actually says as filed. But I think that's the distinction for the board, is what does the bid as filed say? And obviously the intention can clarify what the bid is, but I think that it's still the source of the bid itself.
Yeah, just,
I have Commissioner Chavez and then Commissioner Heath.
yeah, this is Commissioner Chavez. I've looked at I reviewed the 2001 lease, 2011 lease, and it's an annual rent. I get that. But on this bid where you have annual, why would you even put a line for half homestead rent then, if it's not even germane? Because it's just on the leases.
So they added the 4 components that were part of this lease to the annual rent, which normally we have 1 column that goes out. They added the 4 components that were the 4 components of this lease.
The question, let me actually understand the question. You're saying historically you looked at 2 of the previous leases and homestead, homesite wasn't listed.
Well, yeah, because it's just an annual rent.
Annual rent. We have in recent years made a move towards trying to clarify all of the pieces that are included, and home sites which existed historically on some of these are now called out separately. Historically, they were rolled into the annual rent. I think that's accurate.
Yeah, and I just would agree with Commissioner Clark that this is the data we have in front of us.
Commissioner Heath.
Yes. So is the document that we're currently looking at something that staff has compiled?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And what I'm looking at, and I think the question is, what was the bid as filed? And what I'm looking at is this Exhibit 2, which is page 28, which looks like it was filed on August 9th. And it shows that it's 225,820, and then an additional, in my mind, 12,000 for home site rent. Is that our form that is from the State Land Board?
Yes, if I understand you correctly, the bottom part of the sheet I have up now is a snip out of that.
Right. And what you had up on the screen just a moment earlier clearly shows a difference. But when I'm looking at the bid sheet that was submitted August 9th, I guess it felt to me like there could be a sense that those two should be added. And I believe that there is not clarity from the State Land Board in terms of our bid sheet. And that I feel needs to be considered here.
I'm sorry,
So-
what page? What edition is it?
28 of their bid sheet.
And let me just say, I couldn't hear that last comment.
Commissioner, I was asking what page you were looking at.
I'm looking at page 28.
In the red?
Yes.
Page 28.
Yeah, okay.
It's
so
on
same thing,
August
it's on the screen.
9th, 2021. And it shows annual rent $225,820, and then below that, home site rent $12,000. Now, I admit that there is no total, which I believe there should have been, but I think in looking at that, I could easily see that that intent may have well been to add the two. It says included on the grain bin, but it doesn't say that on the home site. And that would lead me to believe that those two should be combined. Now, in looking at the chart you showed just a moment ago, which you used internally, if I were looking at that, I wouldn't have had a question. But looking at the bid sheet that was submitted and is signed by Mr. Cure and is dated August 9th, it looks to me that a strong case could be made that the total was $137,820. And I just want to put that in.
Commissioner, this is Assistant Director Elkridge. Can I ask you for my benefit to walk that this chart does assign $12,000 to the home site as noted.
When
And
you say the chart that's up right now,
yes,
Yes.
and then it also calculates the irrigated bid submitted by Cure. They clearly said they were bidding 1,033 acres times 180. And the grazing bid submitted by Cure, 524 AUM. So when we add those all up, we get to $208,000. So I guess my point is, how do you get to 225? To get to 237, first you have to get to 225, and they haven't listed enough things to get to 225.
well, may I speak to that? I
Yes.
believe that what you're showing us, as you've said, is an internal document where the numbers you have inserted there, indeed, I would agree with you if I just looked at that document. But the document I'm looking at is the bid sheet that was submitted by the Cure, I guess, family on August 8th. It's page 28 in our packet listed as Exhibit 2. And that's where I find these additional numbers. So I totally concur that if I looked at the sheet you've just shown, which I believe was prepared by staff, I can see that there are differences. But when I look at the bid sheet, I feel like I would have, where you're asking me, where did I get the 237? It's based on their submitted bid sheet dated August 9th.
Now I'm asking how you get to 225 to start with. I'm sorry.
I want to add to that because my issue is that I think similar to Commissioner Heath, we've heard from the Cure family that that the figures here in terms of what goes into that total number are inaccurate, but the total number is still the total number. Like that is their bid. That's how much they would be paying to us. So I guess I'm a little thrown by why we would be so concerned about exactly what goes into that if they're not disputing that their total of the 225 piece is what they intended for a portion of this, and that's what we would be receiving in rent.
I'm just trying to, and I'm going to borrow, I'm trying to understand the commissioner's sort of understanding of the math. So to your point, you just said it, you used several times. So if their total rent is 225.
Their total portion, yeah, a portion of what they're looking at is 225. And that they looked at, because I agree that by putting included under rain band rent, if they had also intended that to be true for the home site, it could say included instead of having a number. I think the point of this is that I think there is more ambiguity than we're presenting. And so that's why I would err to the side of the intent of the person who drafted this versus the intent of us interpreting it, because we have a different perspective. Understandably, staff would have a different perspective on what this means. And we're reviewing it now. And if this is what they're saying, is there a particular reason that I shouldn't consider what their intent is? That's all. Is that we could spend all day on the exact math, and no, we're not going to get exactly to that number, but that's not, they're not debating that there's an issue in the numbers that got to it, but they are consistent in that the numbers on the left are the intended.
And
Oh,
I
go
guess-
ahead, Commissioner Heath, and I'll make a comment after you.
I guess I just wanted to respond. I don't know who said it, but I believe someone in the staff said, or perhaps it was one of the presenters, that after the bid was revealed, that they increased their bid. And that was not how I read it. I'm looking at an August 9th submission, which contains those numbers. So I just want to respond to that statement, and I'm not sure who made that.
That was me, and I didn't mean to say they increased their bid. I think they chose to characterize their bid in a certain way.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
And I think that's the heart of the issue, right? Was the, through the legal process, they did get to see the competing bid. Was that an opportunity to, present their bid differently? Or going off of the bid sheet, a total line would have been super helpful. Note for future.
Or at least not having parentheses.
So then it doesn't matter the math, to some degree, or it also doesn't leave staff vulnerable to interpreting, because you did plug in stuff because you had to kind of make a call. But so that's our challenge. Do we think this bid was changed and presented differently in order to, look at the opportunity to give the Cure Brothers the continuation of the lease? Or are we interpreting the worksheet in such a way as the staff was trying to interpret and leads to a different final number? And I think this is very difficult. I'm just owning it. It's very difficult because the case can be made on either side, to be honest with you. So then, we as a commission, how do we want to weigh these competing factors? And by the way, I appreciate the Lynn's Farm bid. It was solid, straightforward, and the right dollar, were calculated. So I think it's a challenge. And I have empathy for where the Cure family is. You gotta dot your I's and cross your T's a little better. But I also think our form could have stood to have a total line, so we don't have to guess at how calculations are made. But nonetheless.
Commissioner Chavez, I have just one last question, William. When would the Cure Brothers had when would have been the first time the Cure Brothers would have seen the Lynn's proposal?
I believe when they queried the information.
But that was before or after August 9th?
It would have been after.
Yeah. Not until, the litigation was actually active through, I think, for discovery.
Right.
Is when that
Yeah,
was.
no, thank you.
Commissioner, I have hands up from Commissioner Heath and also from the Lynn's Farms.
Yep, Commissioner Heath.
Yes.
And then we'll go to Lynn's Farms.
Perhaps this comes under the wild and crazy proposals. Is there any chance that this lease could be split?
William, that would be you on the fly answering that question with no data to support an answer.
Thank you very much.
I'll actually jump in here. This is Assistant Attorney General Aaron O'Connell. That's not actually the issue before the board today. It is a decision of lease
Yes,
issuance.
yeah.
I would say at most could remand to staff for additional consideration, but you wouldn't be able to just make a decision about splitting the lease today.
That's probably wise. Wise advice. Thank you, Aaron. All right, in the Lynn's Farms.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment, and sorry, I don't know which commissioner was speaking to this point, but as far as reviewing Cure's bid as, well, this is what they brought today, and this is what they intended today. In a true competitive bid, if that is the case, I would see in the future, the land board could set themselves up such a case that if you get to a point to where you don't meet the bid, you could go under review and say, well, I intended the bid to be this way. And I'm following along how they reached that number, and I can see the misconfusion on the form, but ultimately it comes down to what was the intent on the day that the bid was submitted. And that was the bid, when we submitted our bid, that was the intent, was this is our bid. With the full understanding that we would not be able to clarify how we intended it later. We were under the full assumption and clarity that this is a one-shot time to bid this property as we feel fit. And we were never under any illusion that we would be able to re-clarify that at some point. Did you have anything to add, Russ?
I think that covers it.
Thank you
Yes.
for your time.
Yeah, no, thank you, Commissioner Clark.
To that point, Commissioner Clark, I just would like to clarify that it's not, I'm certainly not looking at this as this is our understanding based on it today. It's rather we're hearing today what the intention was on August 9th, given where we are in the process, and that there is a material dispute between what the person who wrote this intended on that date versus how staff interpreted it through that time. And that's what I'm trying to struggle with. So it's not saying that we are changing that today. It's really, it's these numbers already being there, not being changed at this point, and the interpretation of those numbers as of the date this was written on August 9th.
Commissioner Braden, and I
Yeah.
just want to align with what you just said. I think that it is what is on the screen right now, which is the snippets of the actual bids, is what we're trying to divide the attention of on that day as they were made separately. And in some respects, the arithmetic is really bedeviling, the different forms. It's very confusing, and it makes it very difficult to evaluate those things.
Well, as Commissioner Scanlon, because otherwise all things are relatively equal. So then, of course, William had to default to his interpretation of the bid amount, because what else are you going to use to make the call? So that's what's really before us.
Commissioner Heath, did you have other comments, questions?
Thank you. Josie, you're a teeny screen out of the box out of the corner of my eye, so I do rely on everyone else to see you, but thanks to you.
I'm prepared to offer a motion.
Okay,
Would that be in order?
are we prepared to have a motion? Any other discussion or comments from the commissioner? Okay, all right, Commissioner Heath, let's hear your motion.
So I'm responding into a request for review for Ag Lease 114332. After consideration of materials presented and testimony given at our meeting today, March 10th, we determined as a board that it is in the best interest of the trust to award AG Lease 114332 to Cure Farms. And we delegate authority to the director to draft an order and take appropriate action consistent with the board's decision. My motion is based on the fact that I believe there was lack of clarity on the form that the State Land Board provided, and that there could well have been a higher bid evaluated by staff had the form been clearer. And secondly, that based on that their bid was made on August 9th prior to their seeing the other bid, and included two figures which add to an amount greater than the Lentz bid, and that they did not show the home site included as they did on the grain bill. I feel that it is in our best interest to make this award to Cure Brothers, or to Cure Farms.
From Assistant AG John O'Connell.
Thank you, Commissioner Scanlon. And Commissioner Heath, just for purposes of establishing the record, are you saying that the bid, your motion is based on the bid as filed as being the high bid? Pure Farms made the high bid as filed?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
thank you for that clarification.
And do we have a second? Commissioner Clark, we will call a vote. Commissioner Braden. Excellent.
I'm gonna vote yes for this motion, with all due respect to the staff as well, because I think that I think it was a best intention, I think it was the staff did their level best to interpret the bid forms. But considering also that we take the Kira brothers at their word today on their intention on that date, I'm a reluctant yes vote for that, but it's definitely a harder vote.
Commissioner Keith,
Aye.
Commissioner Clark,
Aye, for the same reasons that each of my colleagues has presented.
Commissioner Chavez.
Yeah.
The chair will vote yes, but with a note that I don't think it's the staff's responsibility to make sure people do their math right. That's on our folks who are bidding, but that said, it is the form forces the staff's interpretation of what is submitted. And that's not helpful to staff either. We need more clarity so that you, William, you went with what you had and how you could interpret it. It is no judgment at all of how staff's interpretation. Completely understand how you got there. I'm supportive of the commission saying, Kira Brothers, we're giving this lease to you because we believe what you presented today was your actual intent. And so we're going to support that motion. Final comments?
Yeah, just Commissioner Chavez. I just one question, William or anybody. At what point would Kira Brothers get their 118 rights back?
At least.
Within the lease, okay.
All right. Any further comments from the commissioners?
I would like to concur with your comments about, we have an excellent staff that does an excellent job, but we also probably need to have more clarity on this form in the future.
Yes. And I want to thank the Lynn's Farms for being with us today. They did nothing wrong they presented a very competitive bid, and I appreciate their willingness to talk with us about that. With that, the motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we need a little break or should we start? Yes, the answer is yes. Okay, I heard a solid yes. Let's come back in 10 minutes, closer to. From final action, Crystal's B subsurface easement statewide. We'll put that on the April agenda. We're going to still try and hear the other one that we possibly might pull is Jared Smith talking about the Colorado State Forest annual work plan. If we can get to it, we will, but just know we have a little bit of flex with our agenda, so we're going to take advantage of that as we need. Okay, we are back and we are going to move now on to Ben.
Hello.
Hello, Solid Minerals Lease, Pueblo County.
Good morning, commissioners, and it's great to see you in 3 dimensions for the change. For the record, this is Ben Teschner, Solid Minerals Manager, and I'm here to bring this item. It would be an amendment on an acreage expansion to Solid Minerals. There's 11409. There we go. Quick summary here is we're be adding 160 acres to an existing sand and gravel mining lease, which the lessee projects would add 5 to 10 additional years onto the life of this mine and hence the life of this lease, which staff projects would result in about 0.8 to 1.6 million in additional revenue for the Stewart Trust. You may recognize this photo and you may recognize the maps I'm about to show because you saw this same lease back in December when we consolidated the 3 leases into this one lease that we're talking about today. This particular property is undergoing a lot of changes and expansion right now. So as their landowner, we are working to keep up and assist them in this process as we're able to. The current lease is in central Pueblo County, just east of the city of Pueblo, and currently is about 2,700 acres. Again, comprised of those 3 leases that we stuck together a few months ago. And the proposal is to add an additional 160 or a quarter section. If you zoom in on the lease area, again, you'll recognize this from a couple months ago. The lease area consists of a western portion and an eastern portion, a road access permit, or what was a road access permit through some additional land of ours, and then some haul roads through some deeded property that we don't own. And the additional acreage would be this 160 here that's flashing. This would be added to the western portion of the lease, known as the state pit area. And basically the reason for this is that when this lease was first applied for, the belief was that the gravel and sand was up in this area. And as they began to mine this over the last couple decades, they realized there's actually less up here than they thought, and actually the gravel is more down. So rather than sort of moving up and over in this direction, they intend to kind of from where the existing pit is here off this direction. So in considering this acreage addition, staff consulted Parks and Wildlife and the other business lines. This is a property that has had interest for solar in the past, and there has been solar planning leases on not just this 160, but the areas around this 160, including some of those areas that are currently leased for sand and gravel mining. There is no solar lease on this presently, but the renewables leasing manager believes that in the future we would expect this to be a property that receives additional interest from solar. That said, staff also believe that it makes sense to mine the sand and gravel prior to putting solar on the property. This area is a known range for burrowing owls as well as raptor species and migratory birds. The lessee, Fremont Paving, has worked extensively with Parks and Wildlife in their permit amendment process as they've expanded this property. And written in their lease is the requirement to continue working with Parks and Wildlife. Parks and Wildlife, in consultation for this particular lease acreage increase, was comfortable with going ahead with the increase, given that these consultation requirements are in place. There are no known cultural resources on this 160. We do have an agricultural lessee named Douglas Thacker. Mr. Thacker has deeded ground in addition to the lease and is a significant stakeholder in this mining operation. Mr. Thacker toured the property with Fremont Paving and expressed to staff that he was comfortable with this acreage use. So a quick summary of this, of what you'd be approving today. This lease has a $4 per acre rent, which would result in $640 additional rent per year up to this lease. There's a 57 cents a ton royalty, and staff project based on the production from the state pit, assuming sort of a standard or a continued production at current rates, that we're looking at about $160,000 a year tacked on the end of current production, right? We're not expanding, we're not making more per year, we're just making more years. Already in the lease are consultation requirements to consult with Parks and Wildlife. And staff projects that this increases the life of this mining area by 5 to 10 years That's worth around $800,000 additional revenue. Staff's recommendation is based in large part on our fiduciary duty. The State Land Board is a trustee and has a legal and ethical obligation to act as beneficiaries. We believe that this expansion generates reasonable and consistent revenue over time, and also that the stewardship obligations of the lease and those required by Division of Reclamation, Mining, and Safety will mine this property and restore it again to the grazing land to which it is currently. So staff is recommending that the board approve an 160 acres expansion to this solid minerals lease 114098 with Fremont Paving and Ready Mix. And I believe there is the board order for your convenience. I believe also a representative of the lessee. Not here, okay. Our lessee was trying to get to join us virtually and has had some internet problems. And, happy to see if we can, if you have questions you'd like to direct at her, I'm happy to see if we can find a way to go.
Thank you. Do we have first name questions? Commissioner Chavez.
I thought it's that important, but is Mr. Thacker a partner in Fremont? I thought that's what you said.
No, but he owns some deeded ground.
Oh, that's what
Some of the
okay.
stuff that's nearby, so he's really well versed on what's going on with this project. He has very close, close contact with Fremont Paving. And I believe that someone's willing to go over his deed.
Very good. I don't see any other commissioners with questions or comments. Do we have anyone from the public who would like to comment on this agenda item?
Those listening along, if you'd like to make a comment, please use the raise hand feature on Zoom. No reasons, no seeing.
Okay, and I don't see anyone in the room. So with that, we have a request for a motion reflecting the board order. Yes.
This is Commissioner Braden. I'd like to offer a motion to accept the board order for solid minerals lease 114098 acreage increase as written in the board packet.
Motion from Commissioner Braden. Is there a second? Second, Commissioner Clark. We will call a vote. Commissioner Braden.
Yes.
Commissioner Heath.
Aye.
Commissioner Clark. Aye. Mr. Chavez.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, that motion passes 5-0. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate your time with this. Again, we're going to move past tab 8 and go to David Rodenberg, who is up for the next 3 agenda items. So make yourself comfortable. David. And why don't we get started with what is tab 9, solar planning lease, Moffett County.
That's it, yeah.
Morning, Commissioners. David Rosenberg with the real estate section. This final action item that I will be presenting today is a recommendation to approve a solar planning lease with Consolidated Edison Development. So this planning lease helps achieve the agency's goals to increase renewable energy on state trust lands, as well as increasing revenue for the school trust. This action item also supports the governor's goals to shift 100% of Colorado's electrical energy supply to renewable energy resources by 2040. So a little background with this company. Consolidated Edison is development, CED, as I will call them going forward, is a company created for the specific purpose of developing renewable energy projects. The company develops, designs, builds, owns, and operates renewable energy projects, and they are the second largest owner operator of solar in the US. They have 3,700 megawatts of solar throughout the United States, as well as 300 megawatts of wind and 500 megawatts of battery storage. So although the state land board does not have any existing leases with them, or history with CED, staff believes they would be a great partner on this proposed project. As currently proposed, the project subject to this discussion consists of a total of 1,162 acres, which is estimated to produce 125 megawatts of power, which will power approximately up to 66,000 homes. The project is as currently proposed is all in state trust lands. So this is the location of the project in Monmouth County, sort of the southeastern. And this is about several miles just south of Craig and within the Craig power plant in that vicinity. So all of these parcels that you see that's in green and this and the crosshatch and these parcels down here are the state land board's ownership in this area. Specifically, the crosshatch area are the acres that are subject to this discussion today. And this is an ideal location, not only based on topography, but also because of the high-powered transmission line, and more importantly, its proximity to the Craig power plant to offset the potential energy that this project would make. So as the state land board probably knows by now, I'm going to go through this during this presentation just to remind you guys about the three main parts of the board's renewable energy leasing process. There's the pre-application review where the renewable energy leasing manager solicits feedback from the district manager, the stewardship trust manager, and all the lines of business managers. Then there's the planning lease phase, which gives the lessee a limited amount of site control to determine if the site is viable for a solar project. Planning leases are approved by staff unless the project does not follow the board's renewable energy leasing policy, or if the agricultural lessee has concerns with the project that we're not able to resolve and they request to court. This is the right that the board will grant today if they approve the proposed planning lease. And then there's the production lease, which allows the lessee to construct and operate the solar facility. All production leases require board approval, but this is not what we're asking the board to do today. So the pre-application review, this project has gone through this full review and staff did not identify any issues that preclude the development, that would preclude the development of the proposed solar project on state trust land. This review also includes the evaluation of the siting and location characteristics for large-scale solar projects that the board set in their policy back in July of 2022. This project meets all of those 5 considerations. And so in addition, even though the board's agricultural lease has specific language that allows the board the right to remove acres from the lease for renewable energy purposes, staff communicates with the agricultural lessee in order to understand the lessee's concerns and consider ways to lessen the impact of their operations to the degree possible. Our agricultural grazing lessee, Diamond Peak Ranch, was notified of the proposed solar project, and Mr. Raptopoulos, who's the owner operator of Diamond Peak Ranch, stated his concern that the project will have a negative impact on their ability to utilize the agricultural lease, of course, and graze with solar panels. His comments are included as an exhibit to the board's packet. And the agricultural grazing concerns is the reason that this is in front of the board today. Like I said, it met all the other criteria that the board has. So the site location characteristics. Earlier this year, as I mentioned, staff worked with the board to develop a framework for locating large-scale solar facilities on state trust land. They approved the methodology in July, and it considers the relationship to the productivity of the agricultural lands, the state's renewable energy goals, and the agency's fiduciary responsibility to trust beneficiaries, and the long-term stewardship of state trust land. State trust land related to this project, I think I mentioned it a couple times now that they meet all these criteria. So Diamond Peak cattle grazes approximately, their operations consist of about 43,000 acres total. 27,000 of those acres are leased state trust land acres. And then 10,000 of those acres are leased federal land, and then 6,000 acres are leased deeded land. So this specific area is only one lease that consists of 1,797 acres. This map doesn't show all the acres, other acres I just mentioned. So what you see here in green is that current lease that consists of 1,797 acres. It's the green plus the area that's under the blue, which is the proposed solar leasing area. So staff contacted Mr. Raftopoulos in September of 2021 to brief him on the proposed planning lease. And he had voiced his concerns about the effect that the removal would have on his grazing lease and the use of the spring-fed reservoirs that provide water to the property. Our district manager inspected the property and determined that there are 5 total small stock ponds on the lease. However, these water resources are used just for the cattle and grazing on this property. The other nearby adjacent lands that Diamond Peak utilizes has their own water source. Lastly, Diamond Peak Ranch leases these same 1,797 acres for recreational hunting purposes as well. So if the board approves the proposed planning lease and the project moves into construction or production at a later date upon board approval, the acreage included in the final solar production lease will be removed from the agriculture and recreational leases. So this first table up here shows the income from the proposed planning lease over the course of the 3 years, the agricultural grazing lease, and it also shows the recreational hunting lease. If the board approves the proposed planning lease, the agricultural grazing lease and the recreational lease revenue will be able to continue and be utilized for those purposes. The second table represents the estimated revenue potential of the solar production lease over the course of the 20-year period, as compared to the revenue for that same period for the agricultural and recreational lease revenue. As you can see, the solar production lease has the potential to generate $23.4 million for the school trust, as opposed to the total $171,000 estimated revenue for the agricultural and recreational leases. If the project moves forward and the board approves a production lease at a later date, the board would only recognize the solar production revenue. So in summary, this planning lease supports the board's renewable energy goals. It will generate additional revenue right off the bat and will generate significantly more revenue if the project moves forward to a production lease. And finally, the project meets the board's policy, giving staff the authority to issue the lease. However, the reason this item is in front of the board is because the agricultural lessee had concerns they wanted to speak to the board. In addition, if the board approves the solar planning lease, staff recommends sending a 12-month notice of cancellation of the acres related to this solar project that are currently included in the agricultural grazing lease and the recreation lease. Under all state land board agricultural leases, including this one, the state land board reserves the right to put additional uses on state trust lands and commonly does so, whether it's oil and gas leasing, rights of way, or renewable energy. The main reason for this notice is to allow for timely development of the project. And even though the agricultural lease and recreational lease can continue while the planning lease is in place, it gives the agricultural lessee an opportunity to make plans for the potential future project.
Can I ask a question right now?
Absolutely.
This is Commissioner Brady. It's a cancellation notice, right? So if the production lease does not move forward for whatever reason or get approved, the agricultural lessee would be able to continue.
That's correct.
So maybe this should say more like cancellation notice is necessary.
That's definitely more accurate. It's a notice because we were required to give our lessees a 1-year notice per statute. Absolutely. In addition, the board has the ability to cancel these acres because the revenue from the planning lease and potential production lease outweighs the revenue from the agricultural grazing uses of the land. And obviously, the continued grazing use of the land is incompatible with the solar project. You guys just seen these slides. I actually wanted to present these slides more for the public's benefit. Just remind the public of State Land Board's fiduciary duty and their mission. So the State Land Board, as the trustee, has a legal and ethical obligation to act solely in the best interest of the trust beneficiaries. The State Land Board manages an endowment of assets held in perpetual and intergenerational public trust for the financial support of Colorado's public schools and other public institutions. And this mission includes the generation of reasonable and consistent income, which this project will do, and to protect and enhance the long-term productivity and sound stewardship of working state trust funds. And our leases contain best management practices and requirements to maintain stewardship of the land. So with that, staff recommends that the board approve a solar planning lease with Consolidated Edison Development, Inc. on 1,162 acres of school trust land in Moffett County, as identified in this cover sheet, and provide the agricultural lessee a 1-year notice to cancel those acres from their lease. This slide is the board order verbatim for the board's convenience. And I'm happy to answer any other questions that the board may have. And in addition, I believe our agricultural lessee, Mr. Raptopoulos, is on virtual and would like to speak to the board. And we also have a representative from CED if you have any specific questions related to their project, the project on this land.
Any questions or comments? David, at this juncture?
Is the coal plant still operating or is it shut?
It's still operating currently.
It is scheduled for decommissioning in less than 10 years. It will be shut down. It's partially, they've closed some units already, I think 2 or 3 maybe. 2027.
Don't see any other questions from the commissioners. So if you want to bring folks up, that'd be great. Or via Zoom, correct?
Mr. Raptopoulos has been promoted to panelist, so he can control his mic and camera then. And you know the name of your CE?
Yeah, Tom Sweeney. He's here. He's here.
Okay. We have Mr. Raptopoulos.
Connected as panelist. Mr. Raptopoulos, are you able to unmute your computer from your end?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to express myself here. You know, we've been a lease there for, since the 40s, a long, long time. My family has been leased there, and those acres are important to our operation. I know we're a larger operation. Doesn't seem like that little bit of that 1,100 acres would be important. But the main thing on that, we have the lease, it's a sublease with Trapper. Back in the 70s, when the power plant came in, we had to, you know, let those leases go to Utah International and now Trapper Mining. But after a little while, they decided there was parts of that they didn't need at the time they got their mine plan put together. So we were able to get those back on a sublease as approved by the State Land Board. So the property to the south of that is a pasture that we use. The water is, especially in these last few years where it's been so dry, is unpredictable, unreliable. But if you'll notice through that property, those 1,100 acres, there's a a spring that runs down through there in a drainage that provides reliable water. Now, I went over this with Jared yesterday on if there was a way that we could cut out. There's like 106, no, there's 120 acres, I think 3/4 in the very southwest corner of that property, right in that drainage, that would allow us to have some of that water. If that could be removed, and I don't think it would, I think they would remove it anyway, because it's in a wet bottom. Part of it, over half of it lays in a wet bottom, that I wouldn't think that they would want to put solar panels in there anyway. And it's actually fenced off separately. So it's not, it wouldn't require any fencing or any of that either. I don't know if I can get my pointer to work. Can you see my pointer?
No. David, would you try to,
Or
Jared?
Jared, do you know where we're talking about?
I think
Yeah,
Jared is there. He knows. There you go.
So,
That's
so
it.
John is talking about this 120 acres. As he mentioned, it is fenced separately, and there is a stream and a spring that runs through this portion. And John leases the adjoining private, and so he was hoping that this could be excluded at the minimum, so that he could keep this in his operation and still have water.
Yeah, plus, you know, the acreage that we're able to use, the state land that we're able to use from on the Trapper lease that they're not mining is just to the south of it, just adjacent to it, right there. So that, if that could be eliminated from the potential here. Now, I know, and I'm very naive about all the solar stuff that goes on, and I acknowledge that the revenue is a lot better for that, which is, I know that you guys have, the State Land Board is that's their obligation to provide revenue for schools. So I see why you guys are trying to do this. I don't have any problem with that at all. But if we could take that off, but also, I don't know what kind of ground, what kind of terrain that solar, you know, solar panels, but work the best on. But that whole, there's a big ridge that runs right down through the middle of it, and it's pretty steep on the east side. Yeah, it runs right there, and that east side especially is very steep in parts. But I don't know exactly, and I guess that's why you go through a planning stage. If they need to be ground that is completely flat, or if they can work on ridges, or, but like I said, that's why I'm sure the company will go through and assess all that with time. But the other question is, okay, you're going to cancel our lease within 1 year or after 1 year. But I don't know what does that do for, what happens if the land is unacceptable and plans during the planning process, they figure out that it's not, it is not compatible with solar. I understand why they want there, because all the transmission lines and stuff are all right there from the power plant. And there is a small solar unit that is right there close to where the city has their sewage, right there where Jared's got the, but also, I don't know if they research that has been a very inefficient solar area, because the steam that comes out from the condensing units on the plant block out the sun a lot of the time. So it was supposed to be paid off, you know, several years ago, but since the sun gets blocked out a lot of the times from during the cold weather, when you get fog and through that area from the condensing units, and so it hasn't been quite as efficient as before. But like I said, all that stuff is going to come out during the planning phase. But if it proves out that it does not work out, then I assume that we get the lease back again. Is that
John,
correct?
Yeah, this is David Rodenberg, and that's correct. Like we mentioned earlier, it's a notice so that we're satisfying that requirement, but you can continue to graze the lease until and if we move to a production lease at a future date.
Okay, and is there any idea how long that would take, or would be a year by year deal. Okay, you're gonna cancel this lease for next year. What happens if it takes them 2 or 3 years to get their planning done? Were you able to use it during that time period, or do we have to
Yes.
stay out for it completely?
Yeah, staff's recommendation is a 3-year planning lease. And during that entire time, you can continue to use it for agricultural purposes. The cancellation, again, is just a notice to satisfy the 1-year notice requirement to you.
Let me clarify. It's not certain that they can use it for 3 years, that he can use it for 3 years.
As long as it's under
3-year
planning
plan.
lease,
Yes.
right?
It
Correct.
could go to production and we can ask the applicant when it might go to production, but it could be sooner than 3 years.
I see.
I have clarifying questions, Commissioner Scanlon. So then, when he's talking about this potential area that may or may not be workable from the company's perspective, a final production lease could reflect changes in this planning lease that we're looking at today that meet some of those conditions, et cetera.
Absolutely. I mean, we would recommend that the planning lease be for the entire area. And then during that planning phase, we would take these considerations into account that Mr. Raptopoulos is bringing up regarding.
Right.
the wall.
Right. So a final production lease could well reflect a different acreage,
Absolutely.
different vines. et
And it
cetera.
usually does.
This is Commissioner Clark, and it looks like Commissioner Heath has heard it as
Thank
well.
you.
But I wanted to jump in to put a finer point on just that as well. First of all, to thank Mr. Raptopoulos for being here today, taking that time, and for your correspondence with staff and your expression of understanding of what our role is. And, it sounds like being, willing to work with us in this process and understanding what that is. So thank you for that. That is very much appreciated and we hear you. And so to that last point, I just wanted to, again, put a finer point on the planning area that we're looking at now is just that. That doesn't mean it becomes the production area and that this is land that that would be taken out of the Diamond Peak lease area. And so I'm assuming that in this process, that particular 120 acres that Mr. Raptopoulos is speaking to would be looked at in that way to determine if it is ultimately appropriate to be part of future production, right?
Absolutely.
And then I think kind of to his question though, as well, is that we give a 1-year notice. It doesn't mean that in a year the lease will be canceled, but what is that next step? How much notice has been given about what to actual production, kind of how? So it's one thing to know that this could be happening, but obviously they need time to plan ahead of time. So what is that next kind of bit of notice that they would have that is, we're really doing this now?
That's a good question. So we have a list of requirements in our planning list. I refer to them as the Section 7C requirements because it's Section 7C of the lease. There's site plans, there's proof of PPA, those sorts of things. So once we start.
Power purchase agreement?
Power purchase agreement, sorry, yeah. Once we start receiving those types of things and knowing that they're going to start moving towards requesting a production lease, we would then let Mr. Raptopoulos know at that point that we are going to be recommending a production lease soon. So as soon as we know that the project's moving forward, we would communicate that to Mr. Raptopoulos.
And now will we be able to work with somebody just to kind of see what, how it's progressing and kind of what they require?
Yes.
Yeah. We'll have a contact. I guess Jared will know for sure. Who's working with it, I guess. He can be our contact.
Commissioner, just to be clear, there is no additional formal requirement for notice as part of the lease or any contract we have with Raptopoulos. But as David said, as we learn more, we will keep them in the loop and it should become apparent or more apparent what the schedule for construction will be as we move forward.
So yeah, that's all. Just wanted to, we understand that's part of the staff process, want to have that fully on the record and that commitment is made from staff to you, Mr. Raptopoulos, as well, that as the staff is learning more about this, they will be sharing that with you as well. And then my final question was just about, is there any kind of replacement property or is it, any other properties in the area, no, okay.
Well, you know, but ma'am, you're exactly right. That leads me up to this next question. Like I said, you know, previously, after up until 1975 or 76, when that whole state lease was given to Utah International and then part of it given it back to us. But the intent and the commitment from the state land board was that as those properties came back into production again, as they were mined and then reclaimed and came back into production, that they would come under lease. We would have the first right to lease those areas all back again. So your question is well founded and has a lot of credence, because it was a, like I said, commitment from the state land board that at that time, as those lands came back into production, that we would be able to use them. So with that kind of anticipation, and we have been using some of them, they're still under Utah, or not, well, Trapper Mining now, they're still under their lease, but we've been able to use some of those properties back again, but I don't know at what time they'll go back to the state.
Commissioner Clark, can you actually explain what you mean by replacement property? I just don't want to proceed on an assumption, and I'll answer your question.
It was just of the property that would potentially be taken out of Diamond Peak's lease interest for this particular, for production purposes in the future. If there was any kind of comparable land in the area that we own.
I remind the board, we're required by statute, if we have land available for lease, it has to be advertised for competitive bid. We cannot direct leases or land to any individual party. And so that is what we
So
would
it
do if
wouldn't
we
be a
had land
priority
available.
put on this because it's taken away or anything, but if there was land available, it would be put out
It would be
for someone
advertised
to
and
use.
Mr. Alcala would be figured on.
Sure. And then to his point he was just making, I'm assuming there's not an actual anything recorded against the land that runs with the land that is providing the first right that he is
I would
referring
have to
to?
look into that, and I would have to ask our attorney whether, I believe the plant was built in the 70s, and I think
Yes.
statute have evolved since then, but I'm not aware of any written commitment that the land will be returned to any particular lease or lessee.
Okay, yeah, we have that documented. It's in the minutes of the notes. It's in the minutes of the land board. We have that, as it was in the minutes of one of the board meetings.
But that alone would not create a legal
We
obligation.
can look, I'm happy to look at that if you'll send it to us.
Sure.
Again, we're subject to current statute and how we lease land.
Well, yeah, and like I said, Trapper Mine is not yet. They've got a lot of stuff going on there. It's not something that's going to happen immediately because they've got plenty of stuff to do there still. But we're a family operation and we intend that the next generation still be around. And that some of those agreements would be honored that were committed to back in the 70s. But we can face that when we get there. We're a little bit premature on that, but
So yeah, understanding that you'll look into that so that you'll have a formal response
okay.
to the statute. Commissioner Brady?
I'd just like to make a comment, Commissioner Braden, that I think that, this sounds like a potentially really good for our beneficiaries on the revenue side, as well as supporting our renewable goals, like you stated. I think it's kind of exciting to be part of the solution of what is a real looming economic transformation and quite a lot of job loss that Moffett County is facing with the coal plant slated to shut down completely by 2030, as well as the 2 attendant lines. And that we can play a positive role in this community by providing the jobs to construct and maintain this facility. Literally in the shadow of a coal plant that's being decommissioned. I think it's commendable. I think I also share with Commissioner Clark gratitude to you, Mr. Raftopoulos, for joining us today. And I believe that the staff will make a good faith effort along with the project proponent to address those concerns. And we'll be paying attention to that, I think, as that goes forward. I'd also like to put in a plug that, maybe Northwest Colorado being a a place where there's a lot of sheep grazing that I'm hearing a lot about agrivoltaic opportunities with sheep grazing in solar installations. And so maybe this is a chance to explore what that could look like with the project proponent. And yeah, so that just wanted to make those comments. Thank you.
And I don't know what, all these other things during the planning phase, I don't know what it does when you, if you put in all these solar units and you're completely blocking out all the sun to the ground, what it does for erosion. Especially where that area's got quite a little, it's got like I said, a big ridge in there, and it will erode, and it's got lots of clays in it. But I don't know, I guess that's what they'll come up with when they do their planning. I don't know what kind of erosion would happen if you don't have a sod component to the ground. Because I assume they have to clear that off completely, and then it'll be completely shaded, and they'll have to keep all the weeds and the grasses, any kind of grasses or weeds, out of the bottom so they don't contact. But anyway, those are all just different things that they've got to do through their planning. That's just kind of just the information as we go. We're all kind of naive on that. I guess I am anyway. And this is kind of a new deal for our county. But like I said, I understand you guys' goals. And how can I compete with $80 an acre? Or there's no way that livestock business is not that good right now anyway. It's a little bit, especially with inflation and everything else going on, and the high price of fuel and fertilizer. But anyway, I understand.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. We have one more commissioner who would like to make a comment. Commissioner Heath. Commissioner Heath. Okay. Yes. Do you have a comment?
I do.
Okay.
I just wanted to respond to Mr. Raftopoulos' statement that we are making the best financial decision. And yes, we are certainly all desirous of maximum revenue to the state trust. But at the same time, I know my fellow commissioners and I are eager to support agriculture in any way that we can. And we urge the new applicant and staff to work with you, Mr. Raftopoulos, to assure that you have water, if at all possible. So I don't want you to think that we're just making this decision totally on a fiduciary basis, because while that is our first concern, if there's a way to accommodate you and the water needs that you have, I think we're interested in doing that. And I just wanted to state that for the record.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I appreciate that.
I don't see any other commissioners with any comments or questions. Nick, do we have anyone else from the public?
Maggie Hanna was on and had her hand up. Yeah, oh, there she is. Disappeared for a minute. Promoting to panelists.
Maggie, are you with us?
I am here. Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
And we can see you now.
Ah, wonderful. Well, commissioners, thank you again for allowing me to join the meeting. I hope you will be flattered by this, but I wake up many mornings thinking of this commission. I am here as a voice once again for agricultural producers that are having to face this uphill battle. As Mr. Raftopoulos made mention, we in the livestock space will not be able to compete financially, and we are aware of that. And I see the future of needing to be collaborative in this space, and I too want to see that as part of our vision. I woke up this morning wondering, how do I offer anything to this meeting today? This is not my direct community. I have not ever met Mr. Raftopoulos in person, but this issue, I was struck during the Kier Brothers presentation by something that William Woolston made reference to, which was the categories or criteria that landowners and grazers are required to meet the needs of a renewed lease. And they are financial, stewardship, and the stability and viability of agricultural communities. And the piece that struck me in this space is I worry deeply for the future of agriculture and our viability if our viability is continued to be challenged by the very entity that is judging us about our own viability for the future. Obviously, this is a different scope of project than what we've seen in El Paso and Pueblo counties. I think there are some like different elements that I am obviously detached from in some spaces, but I do want to be very serious about the fact that viability of agricultural communities is very dependent on the functionality of these landscapes. And I want that to be a component of how we judge these leases, just as we do our agricultural lessees. And then the other piece that I've been thinking a lot about, and I know that this is not the space of the land board, but I do want to challenge our renewable energy community. And I can't speak for the community of Craig and the relationship that they have had with energy production over the last 50 years. But I look at my own community and I look at what is coming. Last week, I testified in front of the El Paso County Commissioners about a large solar development happening on private lands to support Colorado Springs utilities. And the piece that I'm sort of distraught about is that these communities that provide our food and fiber and natural resources and energy production also aren't supported by these developments. So can we expect that my small community of Hanover or the small community of Craig will be powered by these solar panels and that it's not just going to support the Front Range of Colorado? If there is a way to invest in these communities at the same time that we are facing this sort of clash of bilateral interests, I would like to explore those opportunities. Because I do think if we have a vested interest in the state of Colorado at large, making sure that our rural communities have viability and functionality is critically important. So thank you so much for hearing me. Good luck meeting your 1 o'clock deadline. Congratulations to all the new commissioners. And I just don't ever want to miss an opportunity to see you all.
We always appreciate hearing from you as well. Any other public comment? There's none in the room.
Not seeing any hands, Commissioner.
Okay, with that, I appreciate the robust discussion. We have a board order that David is seeking a motion to support.
I move to approve the board order related to the solar planning lease application for Consolidated Edison Development Inc. as presented in the minutes.
Motion, Commissioner Clark, is there a second? Commissioner
Second.
Brady? All right. Second, Commissioner Heath. We'll call a vote. Commissioner Brady?
Aye.
Commissioner Heath?
Aye.
Commissioner Clark? Aye. Commissioner Chavez?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, that motion passes 5-0. And thank you, in particular, Mr. Rogopoulos, for joining us today. Your comments were really important for us to hear.
Thank you, man.
Hey, David, I believe with us, Weld County Solar Planning Lease Extension.
So these next two board items are very similar in the sense that they are both extensions of existing solar planning leases. And that the only reason these extensions are being brought to the board is because the fourth production of both of those is above the threshold to varying degrees on each of these projects. And staff doesn't have the authority to issue a planning lease because of that. So that's why staff's in front of you on both of these items. And the difference between the two is that one project, the one I'm going to talk about first is, does not have an agricultural SE. The other project which does have an agricultural SE, they're not objecting to the project. In fact, they're participating in the project. I just wanted to make those kind of distinctions on these next two presentations. So this final action item that I'll be presenting today is to recommend approval of an extension of an existing solar planning lease with Boulevard Associates on state trust lands located in Weld County. This planning lease extension helps achieve the agency's goals and the state's goals, as I mentioned in the previous presentation. You guys are very familiar with NextEra by now, but I just want to highlight a few things. Just to remind the board, Boulevard Associates is a company created by NextEra for the specific purpose of developing solar projects. They are a leading renewable energy company that has 20,400 megawatts of power in the US and 1,935 megawatts of power in Colorado. NextEra currently has the board's only solar production lease, Thunderwolf. I've mentioned that many times. That will produce 200 megawatts of power and 100 megawatts of storage capacity down in Pueblo County. The project will generate approximately $900,000 per year in annual revenue starting at the end of this year. NextEra also holds 10 wind production leases that have an electrical generating capacity of 115 megawatts and result in annual lease payments of approximately $400,000. Based on their proven track record and getting projects off the ground, staff is confident in their ability to make projects happen, which ultimately generates significant revenue for the school trust. So this specific project has a total of 1,857 acres that is estimated to produce 125 megawatts of electrical power. Of those numbers, the state trust lands the proposed project has 457 acres of state trust land that is estimated to produce 30 megawatts of power. So that project is located here in Weld County. And it's about 13 miles east as the crow flies from Fort Collins. So the proposed 457 acres is identified on this map by the blue hatched area. You'll also notice this green hatched area. So the State Land Board's total ownership here is about 583 acres, and it consists of this area here. The area in blue is the 457 acres that we're proposing part of the project. The green area is the agricultural leased area. And this area you can't see very well down here is an oil and gas pad that is also not included in the leased area.
In this commission period, if I could ask a clarifying question.
Yeah.
The agricultural lease, proposed lease area don't overlap.
That's correct. They're completely separate. So the project area would not affect our agricultural SEO. It's not currently being leased for agricultural. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. This project is ideal for a solar project because of the topography and the proximity that it has to the Alt substation, which is located here. And then these are high-powered transmission lines that cut through the State Land Board's property. Staff originally issued a renewable energy planning lease on the total 583 acres to Boulevard Associates in 2018. And they have paid for approximately $27,000 over the term of that lease thus far. So that planning lease expired on January 24th of this year. However, Boulevard Associates contacted staff last fall with their request to extend the planning lease. However, staff contemplated the board's change in their renewable energy leasing policy that went into effect last July. And part of that decision sort of prolonged staff's decision to bring this to the board, which is why we're here today. and after the expiration date of the original planning lease. Boulevard Associates provided staff with the status of their project, which included site control, some site control over deeded land, and have completed extensive work with site planning and environmental studies, and have submitted a response proposal to the Platte River Power Authority's recently published RFP. Just to clarify here, these yellow parcels that you see, so this section here, NextEra has under site control, and this section here, they have under site control. The landowner that owns this section parcel also owns this parcel, but they have not secured that land yet. They're still under negotiations with NextEra on those acres. So I won't go through the 3 steps. You guys are all very familiar with that, but I just wanted to mention that staff did go through the pre-application review process and looked at this and did not have any material reason not to approve the planning needs or recommend approval of the planning needs. Again, there's no agricultural lessee on the property. And regarding the siting location criteria that the board has, this project meets all of those criteria, with the exception that so we use NRCS mapping data to have an initial idea of the forage production on the property. And it had indicated that it was below the threshold, but upon further review with our district manager, it's actually above the threshold. But part of the reason for this is the property has been in CRP for the past 10 years and has been rested. We feel like that contributes to the reason why this is so high. But again, staff ultimately believes this is an ideal location and site for the solar project, especially given that NextEra has had the lease for 3 years and has been trying to move the project forward. So the State Land Board's North Central District Manager has received agricultural grazing bids on this parcel, but the winning bidder did not return or execute the lease that was provided to them, so it remains unleased. The district manager, however, has estimated that the maximum potential, if it was leased for grazing, would be $6,250 a year. So again, just to give the board a comparison of the numbers. And the board would recognize both of those revenue streams if we had an agricultural lessee on the property. If the board approves the planning lease, staff would like to lease the parcel out on a year-term basis until the project is brought back to the board for a production lease. So the second table represents the revenue potential of the solar production lease and over a 20-year period, as well as the agricultural lease revenue based on the $6,250 a year. So you can see the difference there. So in summary, this planning lease supports the board's renewable energy goals, will generate additional revenue during the planning phase, and will generate significantly more revenue if the project moves to a production lease at a future date. And as I mentioned several times, there is no agricultural lease on these 457 acres. So with that, staff recommends that the board approve a solar planning lease extension with Boulevard Associates on 457 acres of school trust land in Weld County, as identified in this cover sheet. And this slide represents the board order verbatim. And I'll be glad to answer any questions. And we have a representative from NextEra if you have any specific questions regarding their project site.
No agricultural lessee, but it wasn't CRP, which needs a lessee. So they just, it all was dropped, CRP portion also?
Greg Lucas, Assistant Director, our policy is, our written policy says when something's enrolled in CRP, at the expiration of the CRP lease, the property becomes vacant. There are no renewal rights. It it was intentional that we wanted options to decide what that property, what to do with that property at the end of CFDs.
Any other questions or comments from commissioners? I do not see any. Yeah,
Commissioner, mechanically, if the lease is already expired, how do we grant extension? Are you sort of like activating it and suspending the expiration? How's that?
It would be retroactive to the date that it expired.
David, it expired because we didn't get our work done.
That's exactly right.
That's an important point. Nextera did everything they were supposed to do. We didn't. So,
All right, I don't see any other questions from the commissioners. Nick, do we have anyone from the public who'd like to?
Commissioner, I've got a hand raised from Benjamin Sturgeon. I'm going to promote to panelist. Is connecting.
Okay, it looks like I was muted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Mr. Sturgeon. Welcome.
Okay, great. Yeah, my name is Ben Sturgeon. I'm with 174 Power Global. We're one of the largest utility scale solar developers in the country. We've got planning leases with the state land board as well, in other parts of the state. And I just wanted to comment that we would hope in the future that this lease, because it's technically expired, it's either a retroactive lease or a new lease. And we were hoping it would be a competitive process because we have interest in the land as well. And is there a way I can show a screen? Can I share my screen?
I believe as a panelist, you can.
Okay. It says I can't share while another panelist is sharing.
working on it.
Okay.
How about now, Mr. Sturgeon?
Yes. Can you see the map I put up?
Yes.
Okay. Try and maximize this. Okay. Let me give you a little history about 174 Power Global. We tried to get a top over lease back in 2019, and we couldn't because Nextera had the land in question here under contract. And we have all this land in yellow, and this land in purple, and this land in white under contract. We have an executed PPA with Platte River Power Authority for a 150 megawatt project. We bid into the same Platte River PPA this year for an additional 200 megawatt using this land up here. And we asked the state land board in October if we could get a lease on the land, and we were told that Nextera's lease was going to expire and not be renewed, but it wouldn't be available because of the foraging policy. In November, we passed a huge permitting milestone, and if you're not aware, Weld County's been difficult for solar, and we had this entire yellow portion annexed into this town of Severance, and we've got approval through the town of Severance. They've annexed the property, and our site plan is due next month, and we'll have approval for our project, all the permitting through the town of Severance. And we needed a small easement right here because we're connected to this line down here. That's why we've annexed this portion in yellow in order to extend our transmission line down to Platte River's line. And at that time, the state told us again that this lease was going to expire and not be up for renewal because of the foraging policy. And so we then, when we found out that it was on the agenda to be renewed and it had already expired, we attempted to put an application in for the land, and we were told our application would not be accepted. And we were told there was more factors than just cost, and there would not be a competitive bid process. And so this land here is controlled by UE, who's another solar developer. I assume they also bid into the RFP. You can see that all of our land is contiguous. We've owned a stretch here. So if you're looking at not only the dollar value, a competitive process would increase the value for the state. And also you have to look at other factors of how will the potential project come about. And I know, I'm not saying NextEra couldn't do it. They're very talented developers, but currently they don't have a way to connect, at least as far as I know, they don't have a way to connect this property and this property. Ours is completely adjacent and there's no issue for a future project. And so our recommendation to the board would be to delay. We're not saying go with us. We're saying allow it to be a competitive process. And if you're going to make an exception for the foraging policy for this piece of land after a lease has expired, please let other developers have a chance to bid and attempts to get that land, because we could definitely use that land for our projects as well, rather than having to go all the way from up here down, which we're willing to do when we bid in, but it would be much more convenient for us to have this land. And it's much easier, all developers know, to add a phase 2 or phase 3 to an existing project than it is to do the permitting on a project that isn't yet permitted or is starting much more early in the process. So that's what I wanted to say, is we would like a chance to bid on it, and we would like a chance to make it competitive in the interest of the state. Thank you for your time.
I would just like to make a couple comments to that. So first, because the state land board separates their planning and production, we're not negotiating a production lease, we're negotiating a planning lease. The real money that the board makes is on the production side. We vary our pricing for our planning leases depending on the interest to some degree, but in this particular parcel, I believe we were recommending $20 an acre, $21 an acre, something like that, for the planning lease. So our real goal here is to issue the planning lease to a company that we feel has the best chance to make the project happen. NextEra has a proven track record with us. Every project that they've had with us has moved towards a production lease so far. We have our only solar production lease with them. We have the 10 wind production leases with them as well. And to the best of my knowledge, and in speaking, I have spoken with Ben, I don't believe they have any existing constructed projects yet. They do have 2 PPAs that they have been awarded. Those haven't been proven to be fulfilled yet. And in fact, I'm aware of the Pueblo project where, and this is public information, that they weren't able to fulfill that PPA, and so they're renegotiating it with Black Hills. Those are just concerns that we would have in trying to introduce another company into this foray of discussion. We feel very comfortable with NextEra. We've been working with them for 4 years on this project. They've spent a fair amount of money with the idea that they would have this lease and to continue to try to move it towards a production lease. The board's not obligated to them, of course, but all those reasons, we feel like NextEra is still the best choice if we're comparing the 2 scenarios together.
Along those lines, because I feel like it's not necessarily appropriate for us to be weighing relative merits of the companies, right? Like that's not what's before us today. But from a procedural standpoint, in that this is an existing lease and that is looking to be extended, is there a competitive process at the start, or is it that the company comes to us and then we talk about, it's not that we're putting this out as an opportunity for a competitive bid for different vendors to bid on doing a planning lease, correct?
That's very well put. That's exactly right. We don't put these out for competitive bid. All of our lands are available for people to express interest in. And once we commit to a planning lease, again, we're not committing the board to a production lease, but that's a negotiated process. But we have a certain amount of commitment to the developer that we're working with.
So that's what I wanted, to make clear in terms of what's in front of us today. It's not, what was just requested is not something that is in our purview to do, to open up a competitive bidding process that wouldn't have existed otherwise. So as we're looking at this specifically as an extension though, can you address that part of the question about, and it sounds like maybe there was some different information provided at different points. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to address that part of what we just heard about kind of as this comes to an end and again, why it's being
Correct.
extended and
Yeah, I think there was some miscommunication, for sure. What I was trying to communicate to 174 when they had come to us multiple times asking for this property, wasn't necessarily that we would not lease it to Nextera. The idea was that if we did not lease it to Nextera, if we decided not to for various reasons, or if Nextera let the lease go, we would likely not bring this project back to the board because of the forward value. So it wasn't that we weren't going to lease it to Nextera. It was that if we didn't, we wouldn't put this out for a solar project because of the board's current policy.
What questions, commissioners? Don't see any. I had one quick question related to how the lease expired. It was our issue. And if it would have still expired, or would we just be discussing an extension without an expiration?
Yeah,
For that.
exactly. I don't want to list a bunch of excuses, but part of it, the really big piece of it was that we were debating internally how to apply the board's new policy to our current solar planning leases that we have in place and what that means. I mean, we have, again, we wrestled with the idea that we have a certain commitment to some of these developers with these planning leases. And we felt in this case, because of how close it is to the substation and all the other variables, topography, that it just makes sense to continue to recommend the continuation of this lease with Nextera.
But for that, they would still have their lease.
Yes.
Not expired, so that even the question of opening it wouldn't be relevant. Okay. All right, any further questions or comments?
We have a hand raised for Mr. Sturgeon again.
Mr. Sturgeon.
Yes, is it? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to correct the record. We have not missed any milestones on any projects. The commercial operations date have not come due, and all of our projects in the state are still ongoing. And we have several gigawatt of projects in other states, but we entered Colorado 2 years ago, and we've won 2 PPAs since we've entered the state. But I do want to just say, because the lease has expired, there's no provision in the lease that obligates the state to extend the lease. I understand it's up to your discretion, and there's, often a lease will have an automatic renewal period or a provision that says you can renew the period, the lease. And I know that the planning leases don't have that in there. And so we would like the opportunity to apply for a planning lease. And I'm not saying we'll win. I just know several developers would like that opportunity because the lease has expired and there's no obligation to enter into, there's no legal obligation to enter into an agreement with Nextera for this land as an extension of the existing lease. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sturgeon. All right, any further comment from either commissioners or the public?
Not seeing any, Commissioner.
I don't see any in the room either, so we do have a board order with a motion that's needed.
I would just comment that while we don't have a legal obligation, we also don't have, I haven't seen any reason for us not to extend this, given what has been presented. So I will put forward a motion to approve the extension of solar planning lease 111630 with Boulevard Associates LLC in accordance with the board order presented.
Is there a second? Commissioner Braden is our second. All vote. Commissioner Braden?
Yes.
Commissioner Heath?
Aye.
Commissioner Clark? Aye. Commissioner Chavez?
Yes.
Chair votes yes, that motion passes 5-0. David.
If you were audible, I'd turn you to 1.5 speed.
Listen, I'm going to skip quite a few of these slides. Everything's very similar to the previous situation. I want to highlight a few things. Well, first of all, I just mentioned this is a recommendation for the board to extend a 2-year extension for a planning lease, Buffalo County, to Boulevard Associates as well. So this project consists of a total of 2,880 acres, which is projected to produce 300 megawatts. 640 acres of those 2,880 are state trust land acres. And there would be approximately 60 megawatts produced from that section of land. It's located here in Pueblo County. And really the only other key point I want to make here is that, so this is the parcel. It's currently under lease by Thatcher Land and Cattle. Mr. Thatcher also owns the land that you see here in yellow that NextEra has under lease already, and it's part of the project. And he does not object to this project, mostly probably for that reason. I don't need to go through all of these. The one thing I will mention, and the reason this is in front of the board, is that the pounds per acre, the forage pounds per acre is slightly above the board's threshold, and that's why we're in front of you today. Revenue numbers, really good revenue numbers on the property. We would have to eliminate the agricultural lease and the recreational lease on the property if it did go to a production lease in the future. Supports the board's goals, generates significant revenue, no objection from the ag lease. And therefore we recommend that the board approve the planning lease extensions for the Board Associates. And this is the board order for the board's convenience. And we do have a member from NextEra if you want to chat with them about any details of the project.
Any questions or comments from commissioners? I don't see any at the moment. Nick, do we have any members of the public online?
Members of the public, just a reminder, if you want to make a comment, you can use the raise hand feature. And I'm not seeing any.
All right, I don't see any in the room. We do have a board order in front of us. If there is a motion to support that.
This is Commissioner Braden. I'd be happy to make a motion to regarding the solar planning lease application in Pueblo County by Boulevard Associates LLC. And the motions as written in our board packet.
Motion by Commissioner Braden. Is there a second? Second, Commissioner Chavez. We'll call a vote. Commissioner Braden.
Yes.
Commissioner Heath.
Yes.
Commissioner Clark. Aye. Commissioner Chavez.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. That motion passes 5-0. That was it like 3 times this week. Nicely done. Appreciate you. Last 3 agenda items.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we are going to skip forward to what we do need to cover. Lahara with Matt LaFontaine, and if we can, we'll make Jared's drive in worth it. We'll see how that plays out.
Commissioners, Matt LaFontaine, Acquisition Business Manager. The item before you today is we're calling a 40-acre Lahara in-holding acquisition. It's a proposed acquisition of a small parcel that lies within our larger Lahara asset. And while this is a small acquisition, I hope that the board sees the inherent advantages and sound logic of it. The board's Lahara property is located in Conejos County and totals approximately 45,650 acres. Here's a close-up depiction of a portion of our holding, which is shown in blue. And then you'll see the subject 40 acres identified with a red outline. As you can see, it's surrounded on 3 sides by current state trust ownership. It's one of approximately 7 in holdings within our asset. And so now I'd like to talk through some of the reasons that I think the board should approve this acquisition. It partially removes an in holding. In general, the board has sought to reduce in holdings when and where doing so is advantageous. In this instance, an acquisition would simplify any future state land board coordination issues by reducing the number of private owners with state law. The board is currently exploring long-term strategic options with the Greater Lahara property, whether that includes a future disposal or changes to management or leasing practices. Earlier this year, the board entered into an agreement with a primary consultant to aid in identifying these options. This acquisition can fit cleanly into whatever the board decides to do with the greater property. The board was approached directly by the seller, who resides out of state. Due to life planning, he intends to dispose of this property as soon as possible and would be seeking a sale with alternate parties if the board was not interested. So now we have a transitory opportunity for the board to complete this acquisition. Unfortunately, staff was able to negotiate a purchase price that was both fair and reasonable for the board and the seller. And lastly, since the property is adjacent to state trust land, it is easily accessible and manageable along with the larger Lahara property. So based on the information provided to the board at the March 2022 board meeting, staff recommends that the board approve the acquisition of the subject in holding at the purchase price discussed in executive session. I'll pause here for any questions or comments from the commissioners. Otherwise, I can proceed to show the board order on the screen if that's all.
Any questions from that from the commissioners? I do not see any. We'll first see if there's anyone from the public who would like to comment. Anyone online?
Listening online and like to make a comment, please raise your hand. No comments.
All right, I do not see anyone in the room either. So Matt, why don't you go ahead and move board order? And we will need a motion.
I move to approve the Lahara 40-acre in-holding acquisition in accordance with the board order as presented in.
Motion from Commissioner Clark. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Chavez. And we will call a vote. Commissioner Brayton. Yes. Commissioner Heath.
Aye.
Commissioner Clark.
Aye.
Commissioner Chavez. Yes. And the chair votes yes. That motion passes 5-0. Thanks, Matt. All right, Alicia. Come on up. And we already oohed and awed over your service, and how much we will miss you, and you're irreplaceable, all those things.
I really enjoyed my tenure here at the agency, and so difficult decision to make, but I'm excited for our next chapter in our lives. So thank you. It's been wonderful to work here.
Best of luck, of course.
Thank you. And this will be the best for leasing. Oh, it is so pretty. It will probably be the quickest one, right?
Edge of our
Fireworks.
seat. Edge of our seat. Yes.
For the record, I'm Alicia Hawthorne with the Transactions and Record Services team. This is the March 2022 board leasing agenda. We have 3 leases. All of them are recreation leases. 1 is a competitive bid and 2 are new recreation leases. So I would be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
That was everything I hoped for.
It took me 8.5 years. Finally knew.
Any questions or comments from commissioners? I do not see any. Nick, do we have any public comment online?
Does not appear so.
And
Commissioner Heath raised her hand.
Commissioner Heath?
Right. My question is, it says that on the lease for the Comanche Wilderness Outfitters that there's no public access to that. How would there be access?
So we do have bench strength here at the agency, and Abe is here, and he can certainly maybe answer some of the components of that question.
Good morning, Commissioners. Just E. Medina, Recreation Program Manager. The Comanche Outfitters has an agreement with the surrounding private land across our property to access ours. So.
Okay, thank you.
All right, without any other comment from commissioners or the public, we will need a motion to approve the agenda. Commissioner Chavez,
I move we approve the board lease agenda for March 2022 as presented.
Second.
and second motion, Commissioner Chavez, second, Commissioner Heath. Let's call a vote. Commissioner Braden,
Yes.
Commissioner Heath,
Aye.
Commissioner Clark. Aye. Commissioner Chavez. Yes. And the chair votes yes, that motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Nice meeting. Thank you so much. Commissioner.
Thank you, Lisa.
All right, Matt, or not Matt, I'm sorry, Jared, Matt, we did, Jared. The drive was worth, you're coming in today in this snowy cold weather. So I'm glad we get to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you.
So we are circling back on our agenda to what is F12, Colorado State Forest Annual Work Plans.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for fitting me in. I'm Jared Smith, Northwest District Manager. I did make the drive down just because it's nice to spend some time, especially with the new commissioners, instead of the screen. So very nice to see you all. I will try and make this as brief as possible. Please keep in mind, I believe we're planning this property that I'm speaking about getting on site in August. So I can be as brief as we need to now, and we can cover more in-depth things in August or answer any questions. So my board agenda item today is reviewing the Colorado State Forest 2022 annual work plans. So this property that we're speaking about is on the eastern edge of Jackson County in the Northwest District. It borders Larimer County, and actually portions of the property spill over into Larimer County. This is a close-up of the property. The Colorado State Forest is just over 70,000 acres. This is one of our most, it's a more unique property in the fact that this was our first multiple use approach, where we layered timber management, recreation, grazing, along with, there are some right of ways, but this property was unique in the fact that we had a lot of different uses occurring on the same parcel. This also has a split in the revenue. This is, I believe, the only property in the state that the revenue is split between multiple different trusts. And so on this map, Walden, which is the county seat, is in the center of the county. And again, this property is on the eastern edge of the county. I have a few things noted here. The very north end of Rocky Mountain National Park borders the southern end of the Colorado State Forest. When we're on site on the property, we'll more than likely visit the Moose Visitor Center, which was built with GOCO funds in the late 90s. Sherman Creek is a ranch that we acquired in 2017. And we will more than likely add that to the stop as well. So the annual work plans that I'm speaking about, this is a process that was set up in the late 90s. It is a way that we can coordinate with all of the different lessees on the property to review the upcoming year's work plans, items that each lessee and stakeholder will be undertaking. It gives us an opportunity in reviewing these plans for different groups to maybe collaborate on an item or two. And again, it helps everyone understand what all the stakeholders are planning on doing on the property in the upcoming year. The final aspect of the annual work plans is to have the board review and approve these plans. It also gives the public a chance to make comments on any plans that are being proposed. In the past, the public has had a lot of involvement when we had some proposals on the property, including a ski resort that brought in a lot of letters from the public, and that's kind of where this whole process started. And so we're still continuing that today. just doing a review of all of the properties planned work and projects. So this is just a quick review of the development of the annual work plans process. So the agencies develop the annual work plans. They submit those to the state land board. And these lessees include grazing lessees, the Colorado State Forest Service, Colorado State Parks, Wildlife, as well as the park staff in Jackson County as well. So the state land board compiles all of these work plans and distributes these plans to the entire group for review. The working group, we typically meet in person. The last 2 years, we have met over the phone to review these plans. And then finally, what I've submitted in the board packet is the final draft of the plan, pending any issues that you all have found or any questions you have. Just to review 2021 accomplishments, the property has been seeing a lot of work from the Colorado State Park side. So Colorado State Parks, they leased the property and it's the Colorado State Forest State Park. A few years ago, there's a campground which was an old private KOA campground. It was a private lease from the land board, but it was kind of in the center of the state park. We've since transitioned that into state parks owners into their lease. So the North Park campground that's referenced in the packet and on this slide was the old KOA site. Colorado State Parks has been trying to renovate that to get that implemented into their infrastructure and ready for public use. So this has been a few years that they've been working on the operations and construction designs, which includes really revamping the entire property because the plumbing, the electrical, a lot of the infrastructure was out of date. And, we'll more than likely look at this on the ground in August. The State Forest Service, they have multiple timber sales that are occurring on the property. They did complete the Camp Penick timber sale this past year. That was roughly 324 acres of timber that was removed by a contractor. And again, on this property, we have a number of different sites that the State Forest Service has different levels of timber management on, either freshly removed timber, areas that are that were cut 20 years ago. It's a great place to kind of view the different levels of restoration that come after timber management. Finally, I've got on here the North Michigan Creek Reservoir. This is a large reservoir on the south end of the property that is managed by state parks. They own the water. The dam was leaking. I think it was determined to be leaking a few years ago. So they've done a ton of work on the dam structure, which involves draining the reservoir. They're just finishing. I don't know if you can see the picture in the background is a picture of the dam that I took last year. They're just finishing that up, and the reservoir should be refilled up for the upcoming year. That's been a big project, so it's good to see that coming to an end. For highlights, this is a photo of the KOA, old KOA campground that I was speaking about. This is an area that they've trenched. You can see some of the old wires and tubing that are coming out of the ground, but they've essentially had to start from scratch. So this building in the background, this is a brand new shower bathroom facility that they constructed for the campsite. Prior to this, there was an older kind of bathroom shower area that was attached to the KOA building. So this is a major upgrade for the site. And this is just a photo inside of the building. So it's exciting to see this coming up, and we're looking forward to the rest of the infrastructure being put in place. Moving forward for 2022, so a few of the plans are continuing the campground renovations. We're hoping that the public will be able to use that, the campground within, I believe 2023 is kind of the goal of CPW to get those spots open. We are looking at doing a comprehensive noxious weed management plan for the entire property. As you can imagine, coordinating that over 70,000 acres is difficult. So that involves speaking to all of the lessees and users on the property and trying to come up with a good plan of action that we can figure out who's responsible for what and who can pitch in where we need help. It's very similar with the road inventory. There was a memorandum of understanding between the stakeholders on the property regarding roads. Jackson County has a right of way and a few county roads on the south end of the property, but there's a lot of recreation only roads, timber management roads, and there are times where the lines are blurred on who's responsible for what with the roads or who's allowed to go where. And so we're looking at trying to create kind of a master document and inventory with the roads on the property to help kind of suss out those responsibilities. And the last item I have on here is the natural wolf migration. I am going to go backwards just so I can show the map. So I'm sure everyone's read about the wolves in North Park. The denning site was on state land. It was in this area where the wolves denned. And Sherman Creek headquarters, those are the Gittlesons are lessee. They're the ones that are constantly being interviewed by the news because they've lost 3 cows on site from the wolves. I will say that we've been very pleased with the Gittlesons and the way that they've their approach to trying to work with the wolves and their livestock operation versus taking a hard stance against them. So they've been working with the USDA, obviously CPW, and they've spent a lot of time this winter dealing with the wolf issue as well as CPW has too. And so moving forward, I think in 2022, there'll probably be a lot more projects and work involved with these wolves. And I know that there is talk of more wolves migrating down from Wyoming. So that just increases kind of the workload of our lessees and CPW in that area. I believe, yeah, that is my last slide. So staff recommends the board approve the Colorado State Forest 2022 annual work plans. I can answer any questions or clarify any of the work plans that you all reviewed in the book.
Commissioner Braden, I don't have a question, but appreciate the work that goes into all of this and all the parties and coordination. And I think we're all looking forward to visiting this summer and seeing it on the ground.
This is Greg Okish, Assistant Director. I think one of the questions we'll pose to you after you see it this summer is, as Jared mentioned, this process where you actually approve the work plans started back in the late 90s as there's a whole lot of things, a lot of moving parts, a lot of public interest in what was happening. Over the years, several of the practices that came with that, an advisory board of citizens, other things have sort of been eliminated as management of the forest. We've become much more engaged in management and things have settled down and our plans have become clear to people. We intend to ask you whether or not you want to continue approving annual work plans or much like our other properties, get a regular update, but not actually vote to approve the lessee activities every year. So just so you can think about that when we're visiting the property in July.
Commissioner Heath has her hand up. Commissioner Heath?
Yes. I had a question about the water rights.
Yes.
I know that we're in water court currently to try to get the water rights on Ranger Lakes, but what about at the old KOA campground? Have we determined that we really do have the water rights there as well?
Yes, we own the groundwater rights of the campground.
Okay, good.
There was some issue though when we toured up there.
Right.
Gregory remembers what it
Yeah.
was.
Well, I know that I think there was a few wells, maybe 2 out of the 3 wells that were drilled that weren't filed on. And so that there was no owner. I know that we have some water rights in the area. I believe CPW made.
We have a clear inventory of all the water rights we own in the forest. We don't own all the water rights, in particular the surface rights.
Yeah, there was some question. I'm looking forward to going back and seeing it. I think that was like one of my first meetings, so
Yes,
Yeah.
it was.
appreciate the opportunity to circle back.
Commissioner Heath, that answer your question?
I don't think I heard,
Okay.
Greg Okish. Did you say that we have resolved that at the KOA campground or that we don't own the water rights?
We've resolved it, and
Thank you.
we have a current inventory of everything we own up there. Which is different, that we do not own everything, but we have a good inventory of what we do own.
And does that mean that we have the potential to?
We have, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, when you say we don't own everything, are we pursuing the water rights that we don't own that we might need, or what's the status?
No, what I mean by that is, for instance, North Michigan Reservoir is a water right owned by CPW. We filed on everything we can file on at this point. And the only one we're working to clarify is not who owns the water right with Ranger Lakes, but whether or not it requires augmentation.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments from commissioners? I don't see any here, or with Commissioner Heath, any public comment?
Members of the public, if you'd like to make a comment, raise your hand. Not seeing any, Commissioner.
And none here in the room, so with that, we will need a motion. I move to approve the Colorado State Forest annual work plans as presented with the board order that we. Thank you. That motion from Commissioner Clark. Do we have a second? Second, Commissioner Chavez. I will call a vote. Commissioner Braden.
Yes.
Commissioner Heath.
Aye.
Commissioner Clark. Aye. Commissioner Chavez. Yes. And the chair votes yes, that motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Jared. I'm glad to see you in person too. Appreciate you making the drive.
Yeah, thank you.
How are the roads?
Not great.
Yeah, I bet. I bet.
Come down last night.
I keep getting alerts on what's closed on I-70, so.
Yeah.
Well, we're glad you made it here. Yeah, we gotta hear from you.
And I know we've talked about this, but I was, when I was first hired, I was hired with Alicia Hawthorne at the same time, so we went through training together. And so
Nice.
I'm sad to see her go, and Bart, you as well.
Yeah.
And I think I get an award for lasting longer than Alicia, right?
You do. Evermore.
Apparently Greg hasn't had a conversation.
With that, we do have the minutes to approve. Does anyone have any questions or changes to the minutes? I don't see any, so we're going to move those as approved by acclamation. And good luck to our commissioners with your hearing. It's always exciting over at the Capitol. You will be awesome. All right, thank you all. We are adjourned.
Good luck.
Nice job getting us. Thank you.
Well, we